you're talking to someone for the first time. You don't know them, they don't know you, but within seconds you can feel it. That invisible tension that decides whether they'll like you or forget you. Most people think being liked is about saying the right thing or looking confident, but there's something much deeper happening. Something wired into how our brains recognize safety, trust, and connection. And once you learn how to control it, people start liking you without knowing why. Before we continue, a quick note. Many of you watch our videos but haven't subscribed yet, so please subscribe to our channel Restwise and join our growing community. We'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's amazing to see how connected we all are. If you enjoy relaxing with philosophy, psychology, and science while drifting into sleep, give this video a like and stay with us on the journey. Now, let's get back to the video. It's called the mirror trick, and it's way more powerful than it sounds. Here's what most people get wrong. They hear mirror someone's body language and think it's about copying movements. Someone crosses their arms, so you cross yours. They lean back, you lean back. But when you do that consciously, it comes off fake, robotic, almost creepy. The real trick isn't about imitation. It's about syncing your brain with theirs. Because when two people are truly in sync, their neurons literally start firing together. It's called neural mirroring, and it's one of the deepest layers of human connection we have. Think about it. When someone yawns and you yawn back, that's your mirror neurons firing. When you watch someone trip and you flinch a little, that's your brain mirroring their experience. It's empathy built into our wiring, but when you learn how to trigger this response in others, deliberately, gently, without them realizing, you bypass their conscious filters. Their brain starts to feel like you're the same kind of person, and we all like people who feel like us. Now, here's where the shock hits. Scientists have found that the brain can't always tell the difference between its own emotions and the emotions it perceives from someone else. If you subtly mirror the energy, rhythm, and emotional tone of someone's behavior, their brain reads it as sameness. And sameness equals safety. Safety equals trust. Trust equals likability. But here's the crazy part. You don't even need to do it for long. In experiments on nonverbal synchrony, people who naturally mirrored their conversation partner within the first few minutes were rated as more charming, persuasive, and trustworthy, even when they said almost nothing interesting. So it's not about what you say. It's about how you align. Let's make it practical. Say you're talking to someone who speaks quickly, animated, full of energy. If you slow down too much, their brain senses mismatch. But if you pick up your pace, match that bounce in your tone, their subconscious says, "Ah, this person gets me." Now flip it. If you're talking to someone calm, steady, more reserved, and you blast them with excitement, you trigger stress instead of connection. It's the same with micro-expressions. The tiny, almost invisible flashes of emotion that show on someone's face for less than a second. If they smile softly, you let your own expression reflect that warmth back. If they tilt their head slightly, you allow yours to follow just a touch. This isn't acting. It's empathy made visible. But here's where people mess it up. They force it. They try to copy. The mirror trick isn't about copying. It's about sensing. Imagine you're dancing with someone and you're a beat behind. It feels off. But when you move with the rhythm, you stop thinking and just feel it. That's what real mirroring feels like. effortless connection. And it doesn't stop at body language. Voice tone, pacing, breathing, they all matter. If you slow your breath to match someone who's anxious, within moments, their nervous system begins to calm down. Your body becomes a tuning fork for theirs. This is why great therapists, negotiators, even interrogators master this. They know connection starts in the body before it reaches the mind. Now, let's validate why this works so well. Humans evolved in groups. Our survival depended on reading subtle social cues to know who was safe. So our brains developed a radar for similarity. The more familiar someone feels, the more we lower our guard. When you mirror someone authentically, their subconscious files you under safe, same, part of my tribe. That's why after a few minutes, they start leaning in, laughing more easily, trusting your opinions. It's not because you're charming. It's because you're familiar. But here's the part that feels almost forbidden. Because once you see it working, you realize how fragile human connection actually is. You can create instant rapport with nearly anyone, not because you change who you are, but because you momentarily become their reflection. You speak their rhythm, move in their frequency. Their brain doesn't know it's a trick. It just knows it likes you. There's one final layer, though, and it's what separates the manipulative from the magnetic. The mirror only works if it's clean, meaning you can't fake warmth. You can't pretend to care. If you try to mirror someone without genuine curiosity, they'll feel the static, because authenticity is also contagious. The more real your energy, the stronger their brain syncs to yours. So next time you meet someone new, try this. Forget about impressing them. Forget clever lines or trying too hard. Just watch, listen, match their rhythm, reflect their emotional tone, not their actions. And when you do, you'll feel it. That subtle click when the conversation suddenly flows. That's not luck. That's neural alignment in real time. And once you master that, you can walk into almost any room, talk to almost any person, and within seconds, their brain will say one simple thing about you. I like this person, and I don't even know why. That's the mirror trick. It's invisible, it's ancient, and when you use it right, it feels unreal. You ever have someone pop into your head for no reason? Maybe it's a random person you met once, a creator you scrolled past, or a conversation that never quite finished. You're doing your thing, trying to focus on something else, but they keep slipping back into your mind. That's not magic. That's psychology. And it's called the Zeigarnik Effect. Here's the strange truth. Your brain is obsessed with unfinished business. When something starts but doesn't fully close, your mind keeps looping back to it like a song that won't stop playing. It hates open tabs. It wants closure. And you can use that instinct to stay lodged in someone's thoughts, not by chasing attention, but by leaving the right kind of gap. Think about it like this. When you finish watching a show, it fades from your brain after a while. But when a show ends on a cliffhanger, one unanswered question, one half-said sentence, your mind can't let it go. It keeps replaying, wondering, needing resolution. That's the Zeigarnik Effect in action. It's the same reason your brain reminds you of texts you never sent, arguments you never finished, or ideas you never completed. The loop is open, and your mind wants to close it. Now here's where it gets wild. This psychological quirk doesn't just apply to thoughts or shows. It applies to people. If you understand how to create emotional cliffhangers, you can become unforgettable without trying. It's not manipulation. It's understanding how the human brain naturally prioritizes attention. We remember the incomplete. We crave the ending that never came. Let's put this in real-world terms. Imagine you're having a great conversation with someone, and right when the energy peaks, the moment you both laugh or lean in, you glance at the time, smile, and say something like, "I've got to run, but I need to finish this thought next time." That moment hangs in the air. They'll think about it later, replaying the feeling, wondering what you were about to say. You created an open loop. Their brain wants to close it, and the only way it can is by coming back to you. This is why some people are magnetic without doing much. They don't overshare. They don't rush to fill silence. They leave just enough mystery for the other person to lean forward. It's not about withholding or playing games. It's about letting curiosity do the work. Now let's dive into the science for a second. The Zeigarnik Effect was discovered by a psychologist named Bluma Zeigarnik in the 1920s. She noticed that waiters could remember unpaid orders in perfect detail. But once the bill was settled, they forgot almost immediately. The act of completion shut off the brain's attention circuit. Unfinished tasks stayed alive in their memory. The brain literally treats incompletion as a priority. So when it comes to influence or connection, the most strategic thing you can do isn't to impress. It's to leave something hanging. A story half told. A question unanswered. A compliment that trails off like you were about to say more. That tiny gap of uncertainty pulls focus. The other person starts to mentally fill in the blank, and in doing so, they think about you. Here's an example that's so subtle it almost feels unfair. Say you're texting someone, and instead of wrapping up every thought neatly, you end a message with something that implies more. Something like, "Remind me to tell you what happened after that." Or, "That story actually got even crazier, but it's too long for text." You just planted a loop. Now, even if they don't reply right away, their brain will tug at that thread. It's unfinished. It lingers. But there's a deeper layer here. Emotion. The more emotional charge an unfinished moment carries, the stronger the Zeigarnik Effect becomes. If you leave on a high note, a laugh, a spark, a moment of intrigue, the brain ties that feeling to the incompletion. So every time they think about that feeling, they think of you. Now let's validate why this works so powerfully. The human brain is lazy but curious. It doesn't like uncertainty, so it works overtime to resolve it. That's why cliffhangers drive us crazy, why songs with unresolved chords feel tense, and why we keep checking notifications long after they've stopped being exciting. The mind is addicted to closure. When someone leaves us with an emotional question mark, it turns into a mental itch we can't scratch. But here's the forbidden part. Most people don't realize they're being pulled by it. They'll say, "I don't know why I keep thinking about that person," or "I feel like that conversation didn't finish." And that's exactly it. Their brain is trying to close the loop. The moment you understand this, you realize how much influence comes not from what you give, but from what you hold back. Still, there's a fine line between mystery and manipulation. The trick only works if what you're leaving open feels genuine. Like you actually had more to say, more to share, more connection waiting. If you use it just to play with someone's mind, it backfires, because eventually they'll feel the emptiness behind it. The Zeigarnik Effect amplifies authentic tension, not fake ones. So next time you want to leave an impression, don't overdo it. Don't try to prove your worth. Instead, give just enough to spark curiosity, then step away. Let their brain do the rest. It'll replay the moment, the tone, the look, the unfinished story. And the more it replays, the stronger the connection becomes. You won't need to chase attention. You'll stay in their mind without lifting a finger. That's the quiet power of the Zeigarnik Effect, the art of being remembered by saying less, leaving space, and letting the human mind do what it always does. Crave completion. The illusion of choice. Imagine this. You walk into an ice cream shop, and the person behind the counter smiles and asks, "Would you like chocolate or vanilla?" You pick one, feeling completely in control. You made a decision. But here's what really happened. Your brain never stopped to question whether you even wanted ice cream in the first place. You were guided, quietly, invisibly, into a choice that felt free but wasn't. And that, right there, is the illusion of choice. This little psychological trick is one of the most subtle and powerful ways to influence people. It's how parents get kids to clean their room without a fight, how salespeople close deals that feel self-decided, and how some of the most persuasive people on earth get others to say yes while thinking it was their own idea. Because humans don't like being told what to do. The moment we feel control being taken away, our brain rebels. But the moment we think we're choosing freely, we lower our guard completely. That's the paradox. Control someone too directly and they'll resist you. Give them the illusion of freedom, and they'll walk exactly where you want them to go. Now, here's the fascinating part. This isn't manipulation in the evil sense. It's how every smart communicator works with human psychology, not against it. Because deep down, the brain's number one need isn't freedom, it's the feeling of freedom. The moment you understand that, you can shape decisions, guide emotions, and steer outcomes without ever forcing a thing. Let's break it down. The human brain craves autonomy. We want to feel like our choices reflect who we are, our preferences, our independence. But when someone gives us a limited set of options that all lead toward their goal, our brain still experiences the satisfaction of control. It's called bounded choice, and it works because our focus narrows to the options given, not the ones excluded. A classic example, a parent asks a kid, "Do you want to brush your teeth before or after story time?" The child feels empowered. They're choosing. But either way, their teeth get brushed. That's the trick. Control the frame, not the fight. Adults aren't any different. Let's say you're pitching an idea at work. Instead of saying, "Should we move forward with my proposal?" Try, "Would you rather start with phase 1 this month or next?" You just bypassed the yes or no entirely. You reframed the conversation around when, not if. That tiny shift keeps people's brains in a comfort zone of autonomy, and this goes far beyond business or parenting. It works in dating, in friendships, even in daily interactions. When you say, "Do you want to grab coffee or a walk?" instead of, "Do you want to hang out?" the mind subconsciously commits to one of the given options. You're not asking for permission. You're offering guided freedom. Here's the shocker, though. Researchers studying decision-making have found that the brain rewards the act of choosing. Even when the choices are meaningless, dopamine spikes not when we get what we want, but when we believe we've chosen it ourselves. So people actually feel happier when you let them pick between two paths that you've already preselected. You're giving them agency and direction in the same breath. It's the same mechanism advertisers use every day. when you see. Choose your flavor, pick your plan, or select your style. You're not really choosing. You're staying inside a path that's been designed to make you move forward, but your brain feels ownership. That ownership is powerful. It turns compliance into enthusiasm. Now let's validate this at a deeper level. Think about politics, media, even relationships. The most persuasive voices don't force beliefs. They frame them. They present two sides that sound opposing but lead to the same conclusion. It's not about eliminating choice. It's about curating it. Because total freedom overwhelms the brain. When we're given too many options, we freeze. When we're given a few structured ones, we feel guided but comfortable. That's the illusion in its purest form. Constraint disguised as control. So how do you use this in real life without crossing into manipulation? It comes down to intent. The goal isn't to trap people. It's to lead them smoothly through decisions that align with mutual benefit. The easiest way to apply it. Start shaping the frame before the choice even appears. Ask yourself, what outcome do I want? And then create options that all move toward it. Then hand those options to the other person in a tone that signals respect and freedom. Here's a real-world example. Let's say you're trying to get a team to meet earlier in the day. Instead of asking, "Can everyone start meeting earlier?" which invites pushback, you say, "Would mornings at 9 or 10 work better for everyone?" It feels collaborative, even though you've already set the direction. And the moment people choose, they take ownership. It becomes their decision, not yours. Psychologically, that's everything, because ownership turns compliance into motivation. Once people feel like something was their idea, they'll defend it. That's why the illusion of choice is so effective. It doesn't just get people to agree, it makes them emotionally invested in the agreement. Now here's the twist. The illusion works both ways. Just as you can use it to guide others, others use it to guide you. Every day, from marketing to relationships, you're constantly being handed options that shape your behavior while making you feel free. So the real mastery isn't just using this trick. It's recognizing when it's being used on you. When someone frames your options too neatly, step back and ask, "What's not being offered here?" That question alone breaks the spell. Still, when used ethically, this is one of the most elegant forms of influence there is. You're not pushing, you're guiding. You're giving people freedom inside a structure that leads them where you want to go. And when it's done right, they walk away feeling respected, heard, and in control, while you quietly get exactly the outcome you intended. That's the illusion of choice. The art of leading without forcing, controlling without showing it, and making people feel free. All while they move exactly where you wanted them to go from the start. The confidence loop. You know that person who walks into a room and instantly seems magnetic, not because they're the loudest or the best looking, but because something about them just feels right. It's not luck. It's not ego. It's a psychological feedback loop that turns confidence into charisma almost instantly. And the best part, you can trigger it on command. Here's the thing no one tells you about confidence. It's not a feeling you wait for. It's a signal your brain learns to respond to. Most people think they need to feel confident before they act confident, but that's completely backward. The confidence loop works the other way around. When you act confident, your brain starts believing it, and once your brain believes it, your body reinforces it even more. It's a self-feeding cycle. And if you know how to start it, it changes everything. Let's break it down in real-life terms. You walk into a social setting. Your brain instantly scans the room for threat versus safety. It's not asking, "Am I confident?" It's asking, "Am I safe here?" And whatever your body tells it, through your posture, your breathing, your tone, becomes your reality. If your shoulders are tense, your voice low, your eyes darting, your brain reads that as danger. It floods you with cortisol, your heart races, and your social presence collapses. But if you reverse that signal, shoulders back, chest open, slow breathing, steady eye contact, your brain gets the opposite message: safety. Safety means control. Control becomes confidence. This isn't fake it till you make it. It's biology. There's a direct feedback loop between your physical state and your emotional one. Studies on embodied cognition show that when your body acts out a certain state, your brain mirrors it chemically. Smile genuinely for 30 seconds and your brain releases dopamine and serotonin. Stand tall and your testosterone rises, cortisol drops, and your mind literally recalibrates to match your stance. Your body doesn't just express confidence, it creates it. But the real magic happens when other people enter the equation. Confidence isn't just self-perception, it's social feedback. When you project relaxed certainty, people's brains pick up on it immediately. Humans are wired for emotional contagion, which means we subconsciously sync with the energy around us. If you radiate calm certainty, their nervous system mirrors it back. They start to feel safe around you, and their relaxed response becomes your reinforcement. That's the loop. Action shapes chemistry. Chemistry shapes perception. Perception loops back through social feedback, amplifying your presence with every interaction. Here's the shocker, though. It doesn't start with belief. It starts with behavior. Belief comes last. The people who look naturally confident aren't born that way. They've just learned how to enter the loop fast. They act the part before they feel it, and their brain follows. You can do the same. Try this. Before walking into a room, take one deep breath where you inhale through your nose for 4 counts, hold for 2, exhale for 6. That one breath signals calm to your nervous system. Then shift your posture. Open stance, chin level, slow movements. Don't force a smile, let one form slowly, like you already belong there. Within 10 seconds, your internal chemistry starts to change. And the people who see you, their brains immediately tag you as high status because confidence signals safety, and safety signals leadership. The confidence loop also explains why anxious people often seem invisible. When you shrink your presence, your brain thinks it's protecting you, but it's actually amplifying the signal of uncertainty. Your body whispers, "I'm not supposed to be here," and your mind obeys. The more you repeat that pattern, the stronger it gets. The loop works both ways. Confidence reinforces itself, but so does self-doubt. You can't think your way out of it. You have to act your way out. And here's a wild truth. Charisma isn't about perfection. It's about certainty. People don't follow the most correct person. They follow the most decisive. That's why someone slightly wrong but fully sure can seem more magnetic than someone quietly right. The brain equates certainty with safety. When you move, speak, and decide with clarity, even in small ways, you project authority. And that projection creates the emotional space where others relax and trust you. That's charisma at its core, confidence that spreads. But to make it real, you can't just pose like a power stance meme and expect magic. The loop needs authenticity. You have to attach your confidence to something true, a reason, a purpose, even a small win. Think about a moment where you actually felt proud or capable. Your brain doesn't care how big it was. It just needs an anchor. When you bring that feeling into your body, the posture, the breath, the tone, your nervous system recalls it. Suddenly, it's not pretending anymore. It's remembering. Here's another layer most people miss: micro commitments. Every time you do something slightly uncomfortable and survive, your brain updates its internal story about who you are. That story is the foundation of the loop. You smile at a stranger, and your brain says, "See, we can do that." You speak up once, and it says, "That worked." Over time, each small act stacks into unshakable self-trust. That's real confidence, not arrogance, not loudness, just the quiet knowledge that you can handle what comes. Now let's validate why this matters so much. Confidence isn't just personal. It's social currency. Every human interaction is an exchange of emotional energy. When your energy says, "I'm good here," people mirror it. When it says, "I'm unsure," they unconsciously pull back. It's not about dominance. It's about coherence. When your inner state matches your outer projection, that alignment is what people feel as charisma. It's why some people make silence feel comfortable, while others make it tense. It's not the words, it's the loop. So the next time you need instant charisma, whether it's a meeting, a date, a stage, or just walking into a new space, don't wait for confidence to strike. Create it. Shift your breath, open your body, ground your energy. Speak slowly, like you have all the time in the world. That calmness becomes the signal. That signal shapes your chemistry, and the world around you starts sensing to it. Because confidence isn't a gift, it's a loop. And once you learn to start it, once you understand that your body teaches your brain how to feel, you'll realize charisma isn't something you're born with. It's something you can summon anytime you want. The placebo mindset. Think about this for a second. You swallow a sugar pill, no medicine inside, and somehow your pain disappears, your anxiety fades, your body heals faster. You know it shouldn't work, but it does. That's not luck or coincidence. That's the raw power of belief hijacking biology. And the same force that can calm pain or speed recovery can also transform your confidence, your habits, even your results in life. That's the placebo mindset. And once you understand it, it feels almost like a cheat code for reality. Here's where it gets weird. The placebo effect isn't just about medicine. It's about expectation. When your brain believes something will help you, it doesn't wait for proof. It starts creating the outcome internally. Chemically, neurologically, emotionally. You expect change, and your brain prepares your body for it. You don't just imagine the result. You physically move toward it. Most people think belief follows evidence. But the truth is, evidence often follows belief. Your brain predicts first, then sees what it expects to see. And that's the secret almost nobody talks about. Your mind isn't built to reflect reality. It's built to create it. Let's go back to that sugar pill. Researchers discovered that when patients believe they're receiving real medication, their brains release the same chemicals that the actual drug would have triggered. Dopamine, endorphins, even immune responses. Their physiology shifts to match their expectations. In other words, belief becomes biology. That's not metaphorical. You can measure it on brain scans. Now imagine applying that to your daily life. Every time you tell yourself you're unlucky, awkward, or not good enough, your brain looks for data to confirm it. It tunes your focus, your body language, your tone, until the world mirrors that belief back. But the moment you decide, truly decide, that you belong, that you're capable, that things will go your way, your brain starts filtering reality through that lens instead. It's the same mechanism, different direction. The placebo mindset is about using that mechanism on purpose. It's not about pretending. It's about giving your mind a story strong enough to activate your biology. Because the body doesn't need truth, it needs conviction. Here's a story that shows it perfectly. In one study, hotel maids were told that their daily work, lifting, walking, cleaning, actually met the Surgeon General's requirements for daily exercise. That was the only thing that changed. No new routines, no diets, just belief. A month later, their bodies showed measurable improvements: lower blood pressure, reduced fat, higher energy. The only variable was mindset. They believed they were getting healthier, so their bodies behaved like they were. And that's what makes this concept so powerful and a little dangerous, because the placebo effect doesn't care whether the belief is true or false. If you believe in your limits, you create them. If you believe you're unlucky, you live like it. The same mechanism that can heal can also hold you back. That's why the placebo mindset isn't blind optimism. It's strategic belief. Here's the shocker. The brain can't always tell the difference between imagination and experience. Visualize yourself practicing a skill, throwing a basketball, playing piano, even giving a speech, and the same neural pathways light up as if you were doing it physically. That means your mind rehearses success before it happens. When you step into the real moment, it feels familiar. You've already been there. That's why visualization, affirmations, even rituals work. Not because they're mystical, but because they train your nervous system to accept a new reality before it appears. But here's where most people go wrong. They say they believe, but they don't feel it. And the body knows. The placebo effect only activates when belief hits the nervous system, not just the mind. You have to feel the shift in your gut, the certainty that something has already changed. That's when the loop closes. Belief sends a signal. The body responds. The response reinforces the belief. And soon, what started as imagination starts to feel like fact. You've seen this in confident people. They walk, talk, and move like life will bend for them. And somehow it does. They expect things to go right, so their tone, their timing, their choices all line up to make it true. That's not arrogance, it's placebo logic. Their expectation of success becomes the condition that creates it. Here's the validating science. Expectation changes perception. In experiments, when people were told a wine was expensive, their brains lit up with more pleasure even though it was the same bottle as the chip. 1. When told they'd been given a stimulant, their heart rate rose, even when it was just water. Belief literally edits sensory input. You experience the world through what you expect to find in it. So how do you use this? Start small. Pick one area where you've been doubting yourself, maybe social confidence, focus, fitness, creativity. Instead of trying to force belief, start acting as if it's already a given. Don't ask, "Can I do this?" Ask, "What would a person who already believes this do right now?" Then do that. Your brain follows action faster than it follows thought. Repetition seals it. The more often you send your brain a new story, the more it starts looking for evidence to support it. That's how identity shifts happen, not by thinking your way into confidence, but by living your way into it until your biology catches up. Here's the twist most people never see. The placebo effect doesn't require deception. Even when people know they're taking a fake pill, studies show the benefits still happen, as long as they believe the process can help them. That's how powerful belief is. Awareness doesn't kill it. Openness fuels it. So if you want to rewire your confidence, your habits, or your limits, stop waiting for proof. Act from belief first. Let your body feel the certainty. Your mind will follow. Because the placebo isn't a pill, it's a mindset. The decision to believe something so completely that your brain stops asking whether it's real and just makes it real. That's the placebo mindset. Believe it so hard, the world has no choice but to catch up. The anchoring effect. You ever notice how a $5 coffee suddenly feels reasonable when it's sitting next to a $12 one, or how a $2,000 watch looks like a steal right after you glance at one that costs $10? That's not about taste or logic. That's the anchoring effect quietly hacking your sense of value. And once you understand it, you can use it to shape how people perceive worth, price, or even you, without saying a single manipulative word. Here's what's really going on. The human brain is terrible at judging value in isolation. We think we're logical calculators, but we actually make almost every decision in comparison to the first number, image, or idea we see. That first point of reference becomes an anchor. It sets the tone for everything that follows. The wild part. Even when we know we're being influenced, we still are. Let's say you're shopping for a jacket, and the first one you see costs $500. The next one you find at $200 instantly feels like a bargain, even though 5 minutes ago, $200 might have felt expensive. Nothing about the second jacket changed. Your frame of reference did. That's anchoring, and it doesn't stop with money. It shapes how we judge beauty, intelligence, kindness, credibility, everything. Here's the shocker. Anchoring happens automatically. It doesn't ask permission. The moment your brain encounters a reference point, it clings to it. Psychologists found that even random numbers can alter judgment. In one famous experiment, participants spun a wheel that landed on a random number between 0 and 100. Then they were asked to guess how many African countries are in the United Nations. Those who landed on a high number guessed higher. Those who landed low guessed lower, even though the number on the wheel had nothing to do with the question. That's how suggestible the mind is. Once an anchor drops, it drags perception with it. Now imagine what that means for influence. The person who sets the first anchor controls the frame. If you say, "This might sound expensive, but..." before naming your price, you've already anchored the listener's brain to expect something high. When your actual number lands lower, relief floods in, and suddenly your offer feels fair. The same principle applies to compliments, negotiations, even self-presentation. Let's make it personal. You walk into an interview, and before any question is asked, you say something like, "I've been leading projects in the $5 million range, but what excites me more is impact." You just dropped a massive anchor, $5 million. Even if the job pays nowhere near that, the interviewer's brain now sees you through the lens of scale and leadership. Every answer you give is subconsciously compared to that number. You've framed your value without bragging, just by anchoring expectation. Anchoring also explains why first impressions matter so much. The first few seconds of meeting someone create a baseline their brain keeps comparing everything to. If you start tense or uncertain, that becomes the reference point, and every confident moment after that feels like an overcorrection. But if you open warm, calm, centered, that tone becomes the anchor, and even small imperfections get seen as human rather than awkward. The first moment isn't just an introduction. It's a psychological seed that colors everything that follows. Now, here's the validating science. Anchoring lives deep in the decision-making part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is obsessed with saving energy. It doesn't like calculating value from scratch, so it grabs the first data point it sees and adjusts from there. But the adjustment is almost always too small. That's why a restaurant puts one outrageously expensive dish on the menu. It makes everything else feel affordable. That's why real estate agents show you a slightly overpriced home first, so the next one feels like a deal. Anchoring isn't persuasion through logic. It's persuasion through contrast. But here's the part that feels almost forbidden. You can anchor people's perception of you in everyday conversation. If you casually mention that you wake up at 5 every morning, that you're training for a marathon, that you've been working on something ambitious, you're not bragging. You're establishing a reference point for discipline, energy, commitment. Everything you say afterward gets measured against that frame. Even small details start to look impressive. The brain's lazy, math does the rest. Of course, this can be abused. Marketers use fake discounts, inflated, original prices, or psychological pricing to hijack perception. That's manipulation, and it always cracks eventually. Because when the experience doesn't match the anchor, trust collapses. But when your anchor is honest, it builds lasting influence. You're not faking value. You're helping the brain see it clearly. So how do you use this ethically? You start by anchoring with truth, not exaggeration. Lead with a strong context before presenting your idea. Instead of saying, "It's a small project," say, "This started as a small idea that grew faster than I expected." Same project, different anchor. Or if you're sharing a skill, don't downplay it. Frame it with scale. Most people take a few months to learn this. I got it down in 3 weeks. You've set the reference. Everything after that carries more weight. And you can flip the trick to protect yourself too. When someone tries to anchor you, like a salesperson naming a sky-high price, don't argue it. Just reset your own anchor out loud. "That's interesting, but I was expecting something closer too." You've planted a new reference point for your own brain and theirs. Now the conversation revolves around your number, not theirs. Whoever controls the first frame controls the perception of fairness. At its core, anchoring is about ownership of perspective. It's understanding that value isn't fixed. It's framed. The first number, the first tone, the first impression quietly defines what comes next, and the people who know that don't fight for attention. They guide it. So next time you need to sell an idea, pitch a project, or simply make someone see your worth, don't just state your value. Anchor it. Give the brain a starting point that makes everything after it make sense. Because perception isn't about what's true. It's about what comes first. That's the anchoring effect. The hidden lever that shapes how people see worth, how they judge reality, and how easy it is to make something ordinary feel priceless. The fear response override. You're in a moment where everything starts collapsing. People are panicking, voices rise, adrenaline floods the room. Your pulse spikes, your breath shortens, and your brain screams, "Do something." But there's a rare kind of person who doesn't flinch. Their breathing stays slow. Their eyes stay clear. They move like time just stretched out for them. Everyone else reacts. They respond. That's the fear response override, and it's one of the most powerful mental shifts a human can master. Here's what most people don't realize. Fear isn't a feeling you choose. It's a reflex. The instant your brain detects danger, your amygdala, the emotional control center, hijacks your entire system. It floods your body with adrenaline and cortisol, shuts down rational thinking, and activates fight, flight, or freeze. It's ancient programming. Useful when a predator was chasing us. Not so helpful when you're just dealing with stress, pressure, or confrontation. But here's the secret: the same system that hijacks you can also be hacked. You can flip the script on your fear in real time, if you know how to interrupt the loop. Let's start with what actually happens in your body. When fear hits, your body reacts first. Heart rate spikes. Blood leaves your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logic and planning, and floods your muscles instead. Your mind starts scanning for threat, and your senses sharpen so intensely that even small movements feel magnified. This is why it's so hard to just calm down. You can't think your way out of fear because fear shuts off the part of your brain that does the thinking. You have to physically tell your body it's safe before your mind catches up. That's where the override begins. The first step isn't mental, it's physiological. The moment you feel fear rising, the first thing you control isn't your thoughts, it's your breath. Deep, controlled exhalations signal your parasympathetic nervous system to re-engage. That's the part that calms your heart rate, lowers cortisol, and tells your brain the threat has passed. A simple pattern: inhale through your nose for 4, hold for 2, exhale through your mouth for 6, can literally stop an amygdala hijack mid-flight. You're not calming down. You're taking back control from your ancient biology. Once you've slowed the body, the second step is reframing. Fear and excitement run on almost identical physical chemistry. Same hormones, same heartbeat, same energy surge. The only difference is the label your brain attaches to it. When you feel that jolt of adrenaline, don't say, "I'm scared." Say, "I'm ready." You're not lying to yourself. You're rewiring the emotional meaning of your physical state. Navy pilots, elite athletes, even hostage negotiators use this trick. They don't suppress fear. They redirect it. Fear is just unused energy waiting for direction. Here's the shocker, though. Your fear isn't trying to ruin you. It's trying to protect you. The reason it feels so overwhelming is because your brain hasn't learned the difference between risk and danger. Risk is a challenge you can face. Danger is a threat you can't survive. The override is teaching your nervous system that most modern fears, rejection, failure, embarrassment, are not danger. They just feel like it. The moment you expose yourself to them intentionally, in small doses, your brain recalibrates its alarm system. That's why people who face discomfort daily, public speaking, cold exposure, rejection challenges, start to look calm under pressure. They've trained their nervous system to stop treating adrenaline like an emergency. Now let's validate this with what's really happening neurologically. When you expose yourself to fear repeatedly without harm, your brain's prefrontal cortex starts building stronger inhibitory connections to your amygdala. In plain language, your rational brain learns, How to talk your emotional brain down. You literally build wiring for calm. The more you practice override, the faster that switch happens. Over time, situations that once spiked panic become just data points, things to handle, not threats to survive. Here's where it gets fascinating. Calm under pressure isn't the absence of fear, it's mastery over it. The people who seem fearless aren't missing the panic response. They've just trained to surf it instead of drown in it. Think of fear like a wave. Most people fight it and get slammed. The override teaches you to ride it, using that same surge of focus, adrenaline, and awareness as fuel for precision. That's why in high-stakes moments, whether it's a firefighter entering a burning building or an entrepreneur facing public failure, the calm ones don't feel less fear. They've just reframed the signal energy, not danger. So how do you train this? Start micro. Stress is stress, whether it's a freezing shower or a tense conversation. The next time you feel that tightening in your chest, instead of retreating, stay. Slow your breathing. Drop your shoulders. Feel your feet on the ground. You're teaching your body that fear doesn't mean stop. It means focus. You'll notice something strange happen after a few repetitions. The fear loses its sharpness. It turns into awareness, presence. You're still alert, but not paralyzed. That's the shift. And here's the twist. When you learn to override fear, people can feel it. Your energy in stressful situations becomes an anchor for everyone else's nervous system. Humans mirror each other's states through a process called limbic resonance. When you stay calm, their brains unconsciously sync to yours. You become the steady point in chaos. That's charisma on a primal level. The person who doesn't react, but regulates the entire room just by being composed. But here's the part that feels almost forbidden. Once you master this, pressure starts to feel addictive. Because every time you override fear, you expand your threshold for chaos. Things that used to terrify you become playgrounds for focus. Your nervous system stops treating life like survival and starts treating it like challenge. That's when you realize the calm ones aren't just cool-headed. They're trained. So next time your hands shake, your heart races, and your mind screams panic, don't fight it. Override it. Breathe slower than the fear wants you to. Reframe the energy as readiness. Stay in the moment long enough to let your body remember you're safe. Because fear isn't the enemy. It's the doorway to control. That's the fear response override. The ability to stay clear when everyone else collapses, to turn chaos into focus, and to use your body's panic switch as the trigger for calm instead. The dopamine switch. You know that moment when you sit down to do something hard, study, work out, start a project, and your brain immediately tries to escape. You open your phone, grab a snack, scroll through something meaningless, and tell yourself you'll start in 5 minutes. But you don't. It's not laziness. It's chemistry. Your brain isn't addicted to distraction. It's addicted to dopamine. And the wild part, you can rewire that addiction to make hard things feel good. That's the dopamine switch. Let's break this down. Dopamine is your brain's motivation currency. Most people think it's the pleasure chemical, but that's not quite right. Dopamine isn't about feeling pleasure. It's about chasing it. It's the anticipation, the pursuit, the wanting. Every time your brain predicts a reward, dopamine spikes. That surge pushes you to take action. But here's the catch. Modern life is built to hijack that system. Social media, notifications, junk food, short videos. They all deliver tiny dopamine hits with zero effort. And the more you chase those easy rewards, the more your brain starts to resist anything that doesn't give instant feedback. Hard work starts to feel painful, not because it is, but because your reward system has been rewired to expect quick hits. Now here's the trick. You can flip the wiring back. You can train your brain to crave difficult things, to release dopamine not for finishing a task, but for doing it. It's not motivation, it's neuroengineering, and it starts by changing what your brain associates with reward. Here's how it works. When you start a hard task, your dopamine naturally dips. That's why you feel resistance, procrastination, discomfort. The brain senses effort and thinks, why waste energy when there's an easier source of pleasure somewhere else? That's the moment most people quit. But if you stay in that discomfort just a little longer, if you push through the dip, something interesting happens. After a few minutes of sustained focus, dopamine starts to rise again, this time inside the effort. Your brain begins to connect the struggle itself with satisfaction. That's the switch. Once that connection forms, challenge starts to feel addictive. Athletes, musicians, entrepreneurs, they all tap into this, consciously or not. The runner who loves the burn, the writer who loves the process, the coder who loses hours in flow. They've trained their reward system to fire during effort, not after it. The dopamine switch turns struggle into stimulation. Now here's where it gets even more fascinating. Dopamine doesn't just control motivation, it controls learning speed. When dopamine spikes, your brain literally rewires faster. So when you pair dopamine with hard work, you're not just building discipline, you're amplifying your ability to improve. Every rep, every page, every line of code becomes a neurological upgrade. You're training your brain to associate discomfort with progress instead of pain. But you can't trick your brain with fake rewards. The switch only flips when you connect effort to meaning. If the task feels pointless, your dopamine system stays asleep. But if you remind yourself why the work matters, if you emotionally link the struggle to a goal, a mission, a future version of you, the chemical shift starts instantly. You feel that faint pulse of pride, that hint of energy returning. That's dopamine refocusing on purpose instead of distraction. Here's a simple example. Imagine you're studying something boring. Normally, your brain wants to escape. But if you pause and say, "This is me getting smarter while others quit," or "Every minute here is 1 inch closer to freedom," you're reframing effort as reward. You're releasing micro hits of dopamine through identity, not stimulus. The task didn't change. Your story about it did. That's the neurological equivalent of flipping a circuit breaker back on. There's another layer: timing. The biggest dopamine spike happens when the reward is uncertain. That's why gambling and scrolling are so addictive. You never know what's next. You can use that same mechanic positively by breaking big goals into unpredictable micro wins. Instead of waiting for one giant payoff, reward yourself for progress. But not predictably. Sometimes you celebrate after an hour of work, sometimes after 3. The unpredictability keeps your brain engaged, hunting for the next internal hit. You're gamifying effort. Let's validate why this is real science, not just self-help talk. Dopamine neurons fire strongest when effort and reward are linked through feedback loops. In lab experiments, when animals were trained to press a lever for food, dopamine spiked not at the moment they ate, but when they started pressing the lever. Anticipation became the high. In humans, The same pattern applies. The more your brain links anticipation to effort, the more motivation becomes automatic. That's why people who truly love what they do don't rely on willpower. Their brain rewards the process itself. But here's the part that feels almost forbidden. You can make hard things feel good. But you can also make easy things feel dull when you intentionally cut back on instant dopamine hits. The endless scrolling, constant snacking, quick entertainment, your baseline dopamine resets. Suddenly, reading a book, exercising, or building something feels stimulating again. It's not that those activities got easier. It's that your brain finally stopped overdosing on cheap pleasure. You regain sensitivity to real effort. It's like rewiring your motivational thermostat. Here's the reframe: dopamine isn't your enemy. It's your compass. It shows you where your attention wants to go. When you teach it that effort equals reward, discipline stops being hard. You stop fighting yourself. You start craving the climb instead of the shortcut. That's why some people look unstoppable. They've rewired what their brain celebrates. So here's how to practice the switch. Step 1. Remove some of the instant hits. Cut your quick dopamine sources for a few hours a day. Step 2. Before starting something hard, remind yourself why it matters emotionally, not logically. Step 3. Focus deeply until you pass the discomfort threshold. That's the signal your brain is about to flip. Step 4. Celebrate the effort, not the outcome. Smile at the grind. Tell your brain, this is the good part. Do this long enough, and you'll notice something wild. The things that used to drain you start to energize you. The same chemistry that once chased distractions starts chasing progress. You stop needing motivation because your brain's reward system now wants the work. That's the dopamine switch, the power to rewire your pleasure system so that effort feels addictive, focus feels fun, and your drive becomes self-fueling. When you master that, nothing feels too hard. It just feels like the next hit of becoming who you're meant to be. The time warp. You've felt it. Those strange moments when time seems to bend. Sometimes an hour vanishes in what feels like seconds. Other times, 5 minutes stretch into an eternity. You're sitting in traffic, staring at the clock, and every second drags. But when you're locked into something you love, a game, a deep conversation, a creative flow, hours disappear. That isn't magic. That's your brain distorting time itself. And once you understand why it happens, you can use it to stretch your reality and live like you have twice as much time. This is the time warp. Here's what most people never realize: your brain doesn't actually measure time. It feels it. Your perception of time is built from the amount of information your brain processes in a moment. The more sensory detail, novelty, and emotion you experience, the longer that moment feels. When you travel somewhere new, fall in love, or face something unexpected, your brain floods with new data. Every sound, sight, and smell is vivid. Time feels rich and slow, but when every day looks the same, your brain stops recording detail. You're not living faster. You're just noticing less. That's why childhood seems long and adulthood feels like a blur. As a kid, everything is new. Every summer, every birthday, every friend is a brand new file in your brain. As an adult, your brain gets efficient. It compresses repetitive days into summaries. That's not aging. That's editing. You experience time as memory density. The fewer unique moments your brain stores, the faster life seems to pass. Now here's the real twist. Time perception isn't fixed. It's a focus illusion. When your attention locks fully onto one thing, Your sense of self fades, and your inner clock shuts off. Psychologists call this a flow state. In flow, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for time tracking and self-awareness, powers down. You stop thinking about yourself and slip into pure experience. That's why artists, athletes, and musicians talk about losing themselves in the moment. In reality, their brains stop measuring time altogether. But when your attention is scattered, bouncing between your phone, your thoughts, and the world around you, your brain constantly resets its internal clock. You get what scientists call temporal skipping. You don't actually live through every moment, you skip over chunks. That's why distracted days disappear so fast. You're not just losing focus, you're losing time. So how do you use this? How do you bend your perception so time feels slower, fuller, more vivid? You master attention. Focus is what stretches time. When you give something your complete awareness, you force your brain to process more sensory data. The world feels sharper, deeper. Seconds become heavier. You start to feel time again. Here's something wild. Dopamine, the chemical behind motivation and pleasure, also controls your time sense. When dopamine is high, like when you're excited or curious, time feels fast but memorable. When dopamine is low, time drags but fades quickly from memory. The key isn't to eliminate that shift, but to learn to ride it. When you focus deeply on something that excites you, you get the best of both. Time feels fast while you're in it, but rich and long when you look back. The brain's internal clock lives inside a network called the striatal thalamo-cortical circuit. It tracks time through rhythmic pulses of neural activity. When you're multitasking, that rhythm desynchronizes. Time fragments. But when you focus, meditate, write, practice, listen, the rhythm stabilizes. Your sense of time becomes fluid but controlled. You experience the world in slow motion, not because it changed, but because your mind finally stopped skipping frames. Here's a simple way to experience it. The next time you're walking, put your phone away. Notice your footsteps, the sound of the wind, the rhythm of your breath. Within a minute, you'll feel the world slow down. That's not mood. That's perception recalibrating. You've taken control of your internal clock. Now here's the forbidden part. You can use this on others. When you're fully present with someone, speaking slowly, maintaining steady eye contact, they unconsciously sync to your pace. Their brain's rhythm matches yours. You literally slow their time down. That's why people who radiate calmness feel magnetic. They make everyone else's nervous system relax. Control your tempo, and you control the room. But the biggest gift of the time warp is this. It breaks the illusion that you're running out of time. You're not. You're leaking it through distraction. Every scroll, every half-focused conversation, every mental tab you leave open cuts your life into smaller slices. Reclaim attention, and you reclaim your hours. So if life feels like it's racing by, don't wish for more time. Demand more awareness. Dive fully into what's in front of you. Let your mind slow the seconds until they stretch. Fill your moments with depth instead of noise. Because time isn't just something that passes. It's something you feel. And once you master that feeling, you realize time isn't moving faster. You are. That's the time warp. The power to stretch or shrink reality through focus. Once you control your attention, you stop chasing time and start living inside it. The lucid dream loop. There's a moment, right before you wake up, when the dream starts to dissolve. You realize something's off. The world looks real, but not quite right. Then it hits you, you're dreaming. Everything around you, the sky, the people, the story, is being built in real time by your own mind. That's not fantasy. That's lucid dreaming. The state where you wake up inside your own dream and take control of it. But here's what most people don't know: lucid dreams aren't random magic. They're a psychological feedback loop you can train. A loop that can change not just your sleep, but your waking life too. Let's start with what's really happening. Normally, when you dream, your brain's logic center, the prefrontal cortex, shuts down. That's why your dreams can make no sense, yet you accept them completely. But sometimes, during REM sleep, part of that logic center flickers back on. You become self-aware while your body stays asleep. Your mind wakes up inside the dream world. You're conscious, but still plugged into imagination. It feels like stepping behind the curtain of your own reality. Here's the fascinating part. You can train that switch. You can trigger it intentionally. The key is something called meta-awareness. The ability to notice your own thoughts as they happen. Every time you question reality while you're awake, you plant a seed for lucidity later. The brain doesn't fully separate waking and dreaming. It copies habits from one state to the other. So, when you ask yourself during the day, "Am I dreaming right now?" your mind gets used to checking reality. Eventually, that habit crosses into sleep. You ask the same question in a dream, and suddenly you realize you're in. Now here's where the loop begins. Once you become lucid, your brain enters a feedback state. Awareness feeding imagination, imagination feeding awareness. The more vividly you focus, the more stable the dream becomes. The more stable it becomes, the more control you gain. This is why lucid dreams often feel more real than waking life. Your sensory cortex is firing without limitation. Vision, touch, sound, all simulated at full intensity. You're literally experiencing your mind unfiltered. Scientists studying lucid dreaming found that trained dreamers can communicate from inside their dreams using eye movements. Their brain activity shows REM sleep patterns, but their conscious mind behaves as if awake. That's not spirituality. That's neuroscience proving consciousness can exist outside normal boundaries. It's like hacking the operating system of perception itself. But lucid dreaming isn't just about flying or walking through walls. It's about self-integration. Inside a lucid dream, every person, object, and event is a fragment of your subconscious. When you face fear, talk to a shadowy figure, or change the dream scenery, you're literally rewriting parts of your mind. Therapists have used lucid dreaming to treat nightmares, phobias, even trauma. By consciously confronting what once terrified you, you teach your brain there's no threat, and that lesson carries back into waking life. Here's the trick to getting there. Start with reality checks. During the day, look at your hands and ask, "Am I dreaming?" Try to push your finger through your palm. In dreams, your logic will glitch, and your finger will pass through. That's your cue. Next, keep a dream journal. Write down everything you remember right after waking. This trains your brain to pay attention to dreams, which increases recall and lucidity. Finally, use the MILD technique, mnemonic induction of lucid dreams. As you fall asleep, repeat in your mind, "Next time I'm dreaming, I'll remember I'm dreaming." It sounds simple, but repetition programs the moment of realization directly into your subconscious. Here's where it loops back to your waking life. The more lucid you become in dreams, the more lucid you become while awake. You start noticing thoughts as they form, emotions as they rise, impulses before they take over. Reality itself starts to feel more like a dream, not unreal, but alive. You stop reacting automatically. You start creating consciously. And here's the part that feels almost forbidden. Advanced lucid dreamers use the dream loop to practice real-world skills. Musicians rehearse pieces. Athletes refine movements. Public speakers practice confidence. Studies show that rehearsing in lucid dreams activates the same neural circuits as physical training. The body sleeps. The mind improves. You wake up stronger, calmer, more self-directed. But the real gift of the lucid dream loop isn't control, it's freedom. Freedom from automatic fear, automatic thought, automatic life. You realize the boundary between dream and waking reality isn't as solid as it seems. Both are experiences your mind creates. And once you wake up inside one, it becomes impossible not to wake up inside the other. That's the lucid dream loop. A doorway between imagination and awareness. A reminder that reality, both asleep and awake, bends to the level of consciousness you bring to it. Wake up inside your dreams, and eventually you wake up inside yourself. The invisibility trick. There's a strange kind of power in being invisible, not in the supernatural sense, but in the psychological one. The ability to move through rooms, crowds, even conversations without drawing unwanted attention, to observe instead of being observed, to influence quietly without resistance. Most people chase visibility, more attention, more noise, more recognition. But they forget that invisibility can be far more dangerous and far more useful. The invisibility trick isn't about hiding. It's about understanding how human attention really works and how to slip between the cracks of it. Here's the truth. The human brain doesn't actually see reality. It filters it. Every second, your senses take in over 11 million bits of information, but your conscious mind can only process around 40. Everything else gets deleted. Your brain decides what to notice based on patterns, contrast, and relevance. That means if you stop triggering those filters, you stop existing in someone's awareness, at least temporarily. You become a background element in their mental frame, not invisible in body, but invisible in mind. This is how magicians, spies, and even pickpockets manipulate attention. They don't move faster than the eye. They move smarter than the brain. The moment something fits a person's expectations perfectly, their awareness skips over it. Psychologists call this attentional blindness. When the mind believes it already knows what it's looking at, it stops really looking. That's why you can stare at your phone and not notice someone standing right next to you. That's why pickpockets can steal watches in broad daylight. Your mind filters them out as unimportant. The first step of the invisibility trick is blending with expectation. Humans notice difference, not similarity. The loudest voice, the brightest color, the fastest movement. That's where attention goes. So to become unnoticed, you don't hide in the shadows. You match the rhythm of the room. Speak at the same volume as everyone else. Mirror their pace, their tone, their micro-expressions. The brain's pattern recognition system tags you as familiar, predictable, safe, and what's familiar is invisible. There's an even deeper layer, emotional neutrality. People's attention naturally gravitates toward emotional energy. Excitement, anger, fear, attraction. They all pull focus. But if you regulate your emotional energy, staying calm and unreadable, people's brains literally deprioritize you. You stop registering as a potential source of reward or threat. You fade into the background of their social awareness. That's why you can stand next to someone anxious or intense and feel their energy pull the spotlight, while you, steady and centered, disappear in plain sight. Here's where it gets interesting. Invisibility isn't just passive, it can be strategic. By lowering your psychological visibility, you gain space to observe. People reveal more when they forget they're being watched. They drop the performance. You start noticing micro-signals, tone shifts, subtle glances, small hesitations. The data that others miss because they're too busy being seen. Power often hides in silence, not speech. The more invisible you become, the more clearly you see. Let's validate why this works. In neuroscience, attention and perception are tightly linked through the brain's reticular activating system, a filter that decides what sensory information reaches consciousness. When you align with someone's environment, move, sound, and feel like the context around you, that system deems you irrelevant and stops highlighting you. You literally vanish from their conscious processing. That's why animals in the wild survive through camouflage. Humans do it too. Not with colors, but with behavior. Now, here's the part that feels almost forbidden. Invisibility can also shift power dynamics. Most people crave attention so badly, they reveal their intentions through their attempts to get it. But when you stop signaling for validation, you become unpredictable. People can't read your motives, and that unsettles them. The quiet observer always holds the upper hand because no one knows what they're thinking. You control when to appear and when to disappear. Visibility becomes a choice, not a need. But there's a paradox here. To master invisibility, you must first master presence. If you disappear out of fear, you become forgettable. But if you disappear by choice, because you understand how attention works, you gain real control. You can choose to fade when it's useful and reappear when it's time to strike. It's not about being unseen forever. It's about managing when you are seen. So how do you practice this? Start by studying group dynamics. Notice who everyone looks at when they talk. That's where energy flows. Now, soften your presence slightly. Slower movements, fewer filler words, relaxed posture, neutral facial expression. Speak only when necessary, and make your words carry weight when you do. Within minutes, you'll feel the shift. You'll become harder to track, but more remembered when you finally do speak. Here's the strange truth most people miss. Invisibility isn't about being ignored. It's about slipping under the radar until it serves you to stand out. It's the art of control through subtlety, power through calm, influence without performance. When you stop demanding attention, you start owning it. Because you can appear and disappear at will. That's the invisibility trick. The ability to become psychologically unnoticeable, to see more than you're seen, and to master the space between presence and absence. Once you understand how attention works, you realize the most powerful person in the room isn't always the loudest one. It's the one nobody noticed, until they wanted to be found. The framing effect. Imagine two doctors giving you the same diagnosis. One says, there's a 90% chance you'll survive. The other says, there's a 10% chance you'll die. Same information, totally different reaction. One gives hope. The other gives fear. That's not logic. That's framing. A single shift in wording can change the entire emotional weight of an idea. And once you understand how this works, you realize language doesn't just describe reality. It creates it. This is the framing effect. the subtle psychological trick that can bend people's perception without them ever noticing. Here's the core of it: humans don't think in facts. We think in frames, emotional containers that give meaning to facts. Every word, every phrase, carries a hidden lens through which the mind interprets what it hears. When you change the frame, you change what the brain feels about the same truth. This is why advertisers say 97% fat-free instead of 3% fat. It's why politicians talk about tax relief instead of tax cuts. The first makes it sound like you're being rescued from a burden. The second sounds like numbers on paper. The facts stay the same, but the frame changes everything. The framing effect works because your brain is lazy. It doesn't process every detail of what you hear. It grabs the emotional cue first, then builds logic around it. Psychologists call this effective priming. The emotion hits before the reasoning does. So when you choose your words carefully, you're not just communicating information. You're programming emotional context. You're deciding how someone's nervous system reacts before their conscious mind even kicks in. Here's a simple way to see it. Imagine you're pitching an idea. If you say, "This project has a 50% chance of failing," people tense up. But if you say, "This project has a 50% chance of success," the same people lean in. Nothing changed except the frame, but the emotional brain, the part wired for survival, hears threat in one and opportunity in the other. That's the power of framing. It's invisible persuasion. Now let's go deeper. The human mind is a meaning-making machine. It can't stand uncertainty, so it grabs onto the first frame that makes sense. And here's the catch. Once that frame is set, everything afterward gets filtered through it. Psychologists call this anchored interpretation. If you tell someone, "He's a hard worker but sometimes impatient," they form one impression. If you flip it and say, "He's impatient but a hard worker," they form another. The order changes the story because the first adjective sets the emotional tone for everything that follows. Framing isn't about lying or manipulating. It's about understanding that reality is fluid, that how you describe something is how people will experience it. The same event can be a disaster or a lesson, depending on how it's framed. And that's not just true for others. It's true for yourself. When something goes wrong, the way you talk to yourself shapes how your brain encodes the memory. Tell yourself, "I failed," and your brain stores pain. Tell yourself, "I learned something expensive," and your brain stores growth. You're literally reframing your neural pathways. There's real neuroscience behind this. When the brain encounters emotionally charged language, it triggers the amygdala, the region responsible for emotion and survival instincts. That activation colors the hippocampus, where memories are formed. In other words, the emotional tone you attach to an experience decides how it's remembered. Change the language, and you change the memory. That's why reframing trauma in therapy works. It doesn't erase what happened, but it rewrites its emotional code. Now imagine applying that consciously in everyday life. You can reframe conversations, conflicts, even your own motivation. Instead of saying, "I have to do this," try, "I get to do this." The words sound small, but the shift in meaning transforms the feeling. From obligation to opportunity. Instead of saying, "They rejected me," say, "They freed me to find what fits better." That's not toxic positivity. That's mental framing, using language to direct attention toward power instead of loss. And here's the part that feels almost supernatural when you master framing. You can guide how people see reality without them realizing you did it. You can make an argument sound safer, riskier, smarter, or more urgent, all by adjusting the emotional container. This is how leaders rally movements, how brands create loyalty, and how master negotiators turn no into yes. They don't argue harder, they frame smarter. But the real trick, the forbidden part, is using framing on yourself first. Because your brain listens to your words even when you don't. If you describe your life as a grind, it becomes one. If you describe it as a mission, it starts to feel like one. The words you use aren't just sounds, they're neural commands. You're telling your subconscious how to feel about your own story. So when you're faced with a challenge, a setback, a fear, pause and reframe it. Ask, what's another way to describe this that gives me power instead of taking it away? The brain follows language. Change the frame, and the story shifts with it. That's the framing effect. The silent force that proves reality isn't fixed. It's flexible, shaped by the words we use and the meaning we attach to them. One word can shrink fear or expand courage, end an argument or start a revolution. Change one word, and you don't just change what people think, you change what they see. The Déjà Vu Effect. You've felt it before. That eerie flash when the world feels like it's repeating itself. You walk into a room, hear someone speak, and suddenly your brain whispers, "I've been here before," but you know you haven't. Everything looks normal, yet something deep inside feels off, like time is looping for a split second. That strange sensation has a name: déjà vu. And while most people shrug it off as some weird mental glitch, what's really happening is far more fascinating. Déjà vu isn't a mistake. It's your brain revealing how it constructs reality in real time. Let's start with what it feels like. That tug between certainty and confusion. Déjà vu hits when your brain's memory and perception systems get momentarily out of sync. Normally, when you experience something new, your brain's temporal lobe processes the sensory data, while your hippocampus decides whether it's familiar. But sometimes, those signals misfire. Your familiarity center activates too early, before the new experience is fully processed. The brain interprets that as recognition, so you feel like you've seen this before, even though you haven't. It's like your mind is running a few milliseconds ahead of itself. One part is still recording the moment while another is already replaying it. That overlap, that echo between now and memory, is what creates the uncanny sense of repetition. Déjà vu is your brain glitching in real time, but what it's revealing is even more incredible: that memory and perception aren't separate things. They're two sides of the same process. One builds the world as you live it, the other stores it as you leave it. Here's the wild part. Scientists once thought déjà vu was caused by memory errors or fatigue, but recent studies show it's actually a sign of a healthy brain. It means your internal reality check system is working. The brain is constantly comparing new experiences to stored ones to detect patterns and predict outcomes. When the match feels too close, even by accident, it triggers a false flag of familiarity. In other words, déjà vu isn't your brain failing, it's your brain overperforming. But there's another layer, a psychological one. Déjà vu tends to happen more often when you're under stress, sleep deprived, or emotionally charged. Why? Because that's when your brain's processing speed changes. Your mind races, your attention jumps, and moments start blending. You catch the tail end of one perception as your awareness lags half a beat behind. The effect feels mystical. but it's really your consciousness stuttering, like a record skipping but continuing to play. Still, there's something deeper that pure science struggles to explain. Why Déjà Vu feels so meaningful. Why that fleeting glitch gives you chills, like your consciousness just brushed against something beyond logic. That's because Déjà Vu touches the boundary between memory and awareness, between what's known and what's felt. For a moment, you become aware of your brain constructing the present, and that awareness feels supernatural. You're not just living the moment, you're watching yourself live it. There's a theory called dual processing. It suggests your brain has two tracks for experience, one fast, intuitive, emotional, and one slow, rational, analytical. When those tracks slip slightly out of sync, your fast system recognizes the moment before your slow system does. You experience recognition before comprehension, a ghost of familiarity without a source. That half-second lag between knowing and understanding is what we call déjà vu. And here's where it gets strange. Déjà vu can actually be triggered. Researchers have recreated it in labs by using virtual environments that share similar layouts. When participants explore one space and later enter a second that mirrors the same pattern, they experience déjà vu. Their brain recognizes the structure, not the content. This proves that familiarity isn't about the details. It's about the feeling of pattern recognition. Your mind is wired to predict, and déjà vu is what happens when that prediction fires too early. But beyond the science, déjà vu also exposes something profound about reality itself. Your perception of time isn't continuous. It's reconstructed moment by moment. Consciousness is always a few milliseconds behind the present, catching up to what's already happened. That means your brain is constantly editing reality like a live broadcast with a tiny delay. Déjà vu is when you briefly catch that delay, when your awareness slips between the frames and notices the edit. Now here's the forbidden insight. The same mechanism that causes déjà vu can be trained. By becoming more mindful, slowing your attention, and observing your thoughts in real time, you can sometimes feel that flicker of awareness intentionally, that microsecond between perception and recognition. It's what advanced meditators describe as watching the mind think. When you reach that level, déjà vu stops being a glitch and starts feeling like a doorway, proof that consciousness and reality are woven together moment by moment. So the next time it happens, when you get that eerie flash of familiarity, don't brush it off. That's your brain showing you how it constructs the world, frame by frame, memory by memory. Déjà vu isn't your mind breaking, it's your awareness waking up inside the code. For a split second, you glimpse the machinery of reality, the loop between seeing, remembering, and being. That's the Déjà Vu Effect, your brain's way of reminding you that every moment of your life is both brand new and slightly remembered. A glitch in time that isn't a mistake at all, but a brief awakening inside the illusion of continuity. The empathy mirror. You've seen it happen without even realizing. You smile, and the person in front of you smiles back. You yawn, and suddenly they do too. You cross your arms, they cross theirs. It's automatic, unconscious, and deeply human. This isn't coincidence. It's the empathy mirror, one of the most powerful psychological mechanisms ever discovered. The hidden circuitry in your brain that doesn't just observe emotion, it copies it. When you understand how to use it, you can make anyone feel what you feel. Not through manipulation, but through resonance. Let's start with what's actually happening. Deep inside your brain, in the premotor cortex and inferior parietal lobe, live specialized cells called mirror neurons. They fire both when you perform an action and when you watch someone else perform it. In other words, your brain doesn't know the difference between doing something and seeing it done. If you watch someone stub their toe, the pain you feel isn't imagination. Your brain is literally simulating their experience. That's empathy at the neurological level, the mind mirroring the world around it. But here's where it gets wild. These same neurons don't just copy actions, they copy emotions. When you express joy, tension, sadness, confidence, the micro muscles in your face, the rhythm in your voice, the subtle shifts in body posture, all send emotional signals that the other person's brain picks up and mirrors back. They start to feel what you feel, not because you told them to, but because their nervous system syncs to yours. That's why energy is contagious. Why one anxious person can infect a whole room, and why calm, grounded people can bring everyone else back down without saying a word. This is how empathy actually works. It's not just understanding someone's feelings, it's sharing them. The empathy mirror creates a feedback loop between two brains. You project emotion, the other person mirrors it, and their reaction feeds back into you. The more you sync, the stronger the loop becomes. And if you learn to guide it, you can lead that emotional rhythm, subtly shifting the entire tone of an interaction. Here's an example. Think about a time you met someone who instantly put you at ease. They weren't necessarily charming or loud. They just felt present. Their tone soft, their breathing steady, their attention fully on you. What's really happening is regulation. Their calm nervous system is signaling safety. Your mirror neurons copy that state, your body relaxes, and you associate that peace with them. You like them instantly, not because of what they said, but because of what your brain felt in their presence. Now flip it. Think of someone who constantly talks fast, interrupts, or fidgets. Even if they mean well, their energy feels chaotic. Your mirror system copies their tension, your heart rate ticks up, and suddenly you just want to get away. It's not logic, it's physiology. The empathy mirror is like an emotional Wi-Fi network. Whatever signal you broadcast, others download automatically. So here's the trick. If you want people to feel what you feel, you have to feel it first. You can't fake emotion and expect the mirror to respond. The human brain is stunningly good at detecting inauthenticity. Micro-expressions last less than half a second, but we sense them. If you pretend to be confident while secretly anxious, your facial muscles send conflicting cues. The result? People feel uneasy and can't explain why. But when your internal state matches your external signals, everything aligns. The mirror works perfectly. This is why great leaders, performers, and communicators seem magnetic. They radiate certainty or passion or calm, and the people around them absorb it. They don't just speak, they transmit. When someone says, "They have presence," that's what they mean. It's nervous system synchronization, emotion turned into atmosphere. Here's how to use the empathy mirror deliberately. Before any conversation that matters, a meeting, a date, a negotiation, stop and regulate your state. Breathe slowly. Relax your shoulders. Focus your attention outward. Feel the emotion you want the other person to feel. Calm, confidence, warmth, curiosity. Then maintain that feeling in your body while you speak. Don't force it. Let it settle in your tone and posture. Within seconds, the other person's mirror neurons start copying your cues. Their heart rate adjusts. Their face softens. They begin to feel what you're feeling. And this isn't manipulation. It's communication at the most primal level. The empathy mirror was built into us to create connection, to synchronize groups for survival. We're social creatures wired to reflect one another's internal states. The problem is, most people have no idea they're broadcasting constantly. They leak anxiety, frustration, or insecurity without realizing everyone around them is catching it. When you become conscious of it, everything changes. You stop trying to force connection with words and start shaping it through presence. You realize that every interaction is two nervous systems trying to find alignment, and you can be the one who leads that alignment, not by pushing, but by embodying the feeling you want mirrored back. Here's the almost forbidden part. Once you master this, you can change rooms just by walking into them. You can calm tension, build trust, or spark energy, all through subtle emotional control. The mirror responds instantly, but it only obeys authenticity. That's the real magic influence through alignment, not persuasion. That's the empathy mirror, the invisible bridge between minds. It's how you make someone feel understood without saying a word, how you build trust faster than logic can keep up. You don't force emotion onto others, you invite them into yours. And once you learn to do that, people don't just listen to you. They feel you. The Pygmalion Effect. There's a secret power hidden in every interaction you have. The power to shape how people see themselves, and even how they perform, just by what you expect of them. You might think belief is harmless, invisible, something that stays in your head, but it isn't. Belief leaks. It shows in your tone, your body language, your micro reactions, and other people's brains are wired to pick those signals up. They adjust, adapt, and eventually become what they think you already see in them. That's the Pygmalion Effect, the phenomenon where expectation quietly becomes reality. It started with a study that shocked the scientific world. In the 1960s, researchers Robert Rosenthal and Lenore Jacobson walked into a school with a simple idea. They told teachers that certain students, chosen at random, were on the verge of an intellectual growth spurt. There was no test, no secret data, just a label. 8 months later, those randomly chosen students actually scored higher on IQ tests. The only difference was how their teachers expected them to do. Those expectations changed the teacher's behavior. Warmer tone, more patience, more encouragement. And the kids absorbed that belief as self-image. The students rose to meet a future that was never real until someone believed it was. That's the hidden engine of the Pygmalion Effect. Belief becomes a blueprint for behavior. When you expect success from someone, your micro signals tell their subconscious you are capable, you are seen, you are supposed to win. Their brain responds by increasing focus, effort, and persistence, not because they consciously decide to, but because the environment around them now mirrors belief instead of doubt. The brain's reward system fires more dopamine when it senses social approval. Motivation doesn't start inside us. It's triggered by how others reflect our potential. Here's the part that feels almost unfair. The opposite is true too. When you expect someone to fail, your body language shrinks around them. You interrupt more, you encourage less, you notice their mistakes faster. They sense it instantly. Humans are expert mind readers when it comes to emotion. That silent signal plants a seed of self-doubt, and the brain starts conserving effort. Why try, it says, if failure is already predicted? And before long, They fulfill the prophecy you didn't even know you made. It's not just about others. The Pygmalion Effect runs both ways. You can use it on yourself. Every goal, every challenge, is shaped by the expectations you hold internally. When you approach something assuming you'll fail, your body shifts into protection mode. Muscles tighten, breathing shallows. The brain's creativity shuts down. You're not fighting the problem anymore. You're fighting your own disbelief. But when you approach with expectation of growth, not arrogance, but certainty that effort will pay off, your entire physiology aligns with performance. You breathe deeper. You take more risks. You notice more opportunities. Expectation literally opens perception. There's a neurological reason for this. The brain's predictive coding system is constantly forecasting what's about to happen based on prior beliefs. It then filters sensory input to confirm those predictions. In simple terms, your brain sees what it expects to see. If you expect disappointment, you'll find it. If you expect progress, your brain will highlight every sign of it. Reality bends around expectation because perception itself is biased by belief. Now imagine what happens when two people's expectations feed into each other, when belief becomes a loop. A teacher expects greatness from a student. The student feels that belief and performs better. The teacher sees improvement and believes even more. Both realities amplify each other until the loop becomes truth. That's the most powerful form of the Pygmalion Effect. Collective expectation shaping shared reality. It's how cultures evolve, teams transform, and relationships thrive. When two people believe in each other's potential, the outcome becomes inevitable. But here's the subtle danger. Expectation cuts both ways. You can lift someone higher than they ever imagined, or cage them inside your assumptions. The quiet moment when you doubt someone's ability can echo louder than any insult. People don't just respond to what you say, they respond to what you believe. Your expectation becomes their mirror. And over time, they start reflecting it back until both of you forget it was ever just a story. So how do you use this intentionally? Start with awareness. Watch your micro reactions when someone struggles. Your sighs, your tone, your small impatience. Those are signals of disbelief. Replace them with curiosity. What would this look like if they could do it? Ask better questions. Give smaller wins. Reward progress, not perfection. Each tiny act reinforces belief until confidence becomes self-sustaining. Then turn the lens inward. When you face something intimidating, experiment with belief. Pretend you're the kind of person who can handle it. Expect yourself to rise. Not perfectly, but persistently. That simple expectation shifts your attention toward evidence that supports it, and soon enough, what was once imagined becomes familiar. The truth is, the Pygmalion Effect isn't magic. It's human psychology laid bare. People don't become what they are told. They become what is believed about them. Expectation is the invisible architecture of performance, the story underneath every success or failure. That's the Pygmalion Effect. Proof that belief is contagious, that what you see in others becomes what they see in themselves, and that reality often follows the shape of your expectations. The question isn't whether it works. It's whether you'll use it to limit people or to set them free. The reverse psychology flip. You tell someone don't look, and instantly they want to. You say don't touch that button, and their hand starts to itch. It's almost funny how predictable it is. But it's also one of the most powerful tools in human behavior. This is the reverse psychology flip. the art of making people want exactly what you seem to deny them. It works not because people are stupid or gullible, but because the human mind has a built-in rebellion mechanism. We don't just want freedom, we need it. And the moment someone tries to take it away, we fight to prove it still exists. Here's the truth: the brain hates feeling controlled. Psychologists call this reactance, that spark of resistance that flares up when we sense someone trying to influence us. It's the reason a kid suddenly loves the toy you said they can't have. It's why adults defend bad habits once someone tells them to quit. Reactance isn't immaturity. It's a primal defense system. It evolved to protect our sense of autonomy, because for thousands of years, freedom meant survival. So when someone restricts your choices, even slightly, your subconscious doesn't hear, no. It hears, you're losing control, and immediately pushes back. Now here's where it gets interesting. If you flip that instinct, if you use people's need for autonomy instead of fighting it, you can guide them without them realizing it. That's the reverse psychology flip. You don't tell someone what to do, you make them decide to do it themselves. You plant the idea, then pull your hand back just enough for them to claim ownership of it. They think it's their idea. And that's exactly why it works. Imagine this: a friend insists they don't want to try a new restaurant. You could argue, persuade, explain, or you could shrug and say, "Yeah, you're right, it's probably not your kind of place." 9 times out of 10, their curiosity lights up. Now they have something to prove. They'll say, "Wait, why not my kind of place?" And suddenly they're suggesting going there. You didn't push, you invited their ego to pull. Reverse psychology thrives in the space between freedom and curiosity. When people feel like a choice is being taken from them, they grab tighter. But when you seem to give up control, they reclaim it. By doing exactly what you wanted all along. Parents use it. Marketers use it. Negotiators use it. You probably won't be interested, but is one of the oldest and most effective lines in persuasion because it flips control. The listener feels like they're making a free choice, and that makes the decision emotionally satisfying. There's real neuroscience behind it too. When autonomy feels threatened, the brain's anterior cingulate cortex, the region responsible for emotional conflict, lights up. That discomfort pushes us to restore balance by reasserting independence. The moment you stop pressuring, the conflict drops, and the person's resistance collapses. They swing back toward curiosity and choice, because now the threat is gone. You didn't overpower them. You guided them back to wanting what you framed as forbidden. But here's the key: this trick only works if you're subtle. If someone senses you're using reverse psychology, the spell breaks instantly. Authentic tone, calm energy, and believable detachment are essential. You can't sound smug or manipulative. You have to genuinely seem indifferent. People can feel intention. If your ego wants to win, they'll feel the push and resist harder. But if you make peace with any outcome, their mind opens up, and that's when the flip happens naturally. You can even use this on yourself. The next time you can't focus or feel unmotivated, tell yourself, "Fine, don't do it. Just sit here and waste time if you want." Watch how fast your brain rebels. That internal reactance pushes you into action, because even your subconscious doesn't like being told it's weak. The same instinct that resists others can be used to resist your own resistance. The reverse psychology flip isn't about tricking people. It's about understanding their need for ownership. Give someone freedom, and they'll follow. Take it away, and they'll fight. You can't force desire, but you can guide it by stepping back. The paradox is simple: the more you let people feel in control, the easier it is to influence them. That's the reverse psychology flip. The quiet art of turning resistance into motivation, of making people chase what you appear to release. When you stop pushing, they start pulling. And in that moment, they're not doing what you want. They're doing what they think they chose. The spotlight illusion. You walk into a room and instantly feel every eye on you. Or at least, it feels that way. You start worrying about how you look, how you sound, what people are thinking. Did they notice that small mistake you just made? That weird pause, that nervous laugh. In your mind, it's all magnified, like you're standing under a giant mental spotlight. But here's the truth: no one's watching as closely as you think they are. What feels like judgment is usually just your brain exaggerating attention. That's the spotlight illusion. The false belief that people are paying far more attention to you than they really are. This illusion comes from one of the mind's oldest survival instincts: self-monitoring. Humans evolved to track social acceptance because, in ancient groups, belonging meant safety. The problem is that ancient system still runs full throttle in a modern world that doesn't require constant approval. So when you walk into a crowd, your brain automatically scans for threat, disapproval, rejection, embarrassment, and overestimates how much people notice you. It's not vanity, it's wiring. In the early 2000s, researchers Thomas Jelovich and Kenneth Savitsky ran a clever experiment that exposed this illusion perfectly. They asked college students to wear a bright, embarrassing T-shirt featuring Barry Manilow's face and then enter a room of peers. Afterward, each participant guessed how many people noticed the shirt. On average, they thought half the room did. In reality, less than a quarter even remembered it. The conclusion was simple: we overestimate how visible we are by about double. The spotlight feels harsh, but in truth, it's barely flickering. Here's why this matters. The spotlight illusion doesn't just create anxiety, it shapes your behavior. It makes you hold back your opinions, second guess your choices, and overanalyze interactions that everyone else forgot 30 seconds later. You replay moments in your head like everyone's still watching the replay too. But they're not. Most people are trapped under their own spotlight, just as self-conscious, just as focused on their flaws. You're worried about your shirt. They're worried about their hair. Everyone's too busy performing to actually be your audience. The illusion can be broken, and when it breaks, confidence floods in. The first step is realizing that attention is expensive. The human brain can only track a few things at once, and most of that focus is spent inward. When you talk to someone, they're not analyzing your tone, they're thinking about how to respond. When you walk into a room, no one's cataloging your outfit, they're wondering if they look awkward. The moment you internalize this, a kind of freedom appears. The freedom to act, speak, and move without fear of invisible judgment. Here's something deeper. The brain's prefrontal cortex, which handles self-awareness, also regulates your sense of social visibility. When you feel nervous, that part of the brain lights up, simulating a mental audience. It's not real, it's projection. You're imagining other minds thinking about you, but those minds are busy imagining you thinking about them. Everyone's spotlight overlaps but rarely touches. You can test this easily. Think of a time you were sure everyone noticed something embarrassing. A stain on your shirt, a stumble, a wrong word. Now ask yourself, how many people actually mentioned it? Probably none. That's because people remember how you made them feel, not the microscopic details of what you did. The illusion fades the moment you realize memory doesn't record perfection. It records presence. Here's the paradox. When you stop worrying about being watched, people often like you more. Confidence signals comfort, and comfort invites trust. The less self-conscious you are, the more magnetic you become, because your focus shifts outward. Instead of performing, you connect. Instead of shrinking under imagined judgment, you expand into authenticity. That's the secret. The spotlight was never real. It was a trick of perspective, a leftover instinct amplified by modern anxiety. No one's keeping score the way you think they are. The truth is liberating. Everyone is too busy worrying about themselves to notice your mistakes. That's the spotlight illusion. The freedom that comes when you finally realize the audience in your head doesn't exist. You were never being watched as closely as you feared, and once you understand that, you stop performing and start living. The body language copy. Ever met someone and felt an instant sense of comfort? Like you just clicked for no obvious reason. Maybe they laughed when you did, leaned in when you spoke, or mirrored your tone without you noticing. That wasn't coincidence. That was psychology in motion. It's called the body language copy, the subtle, almost invisible art of mirroring someone's physical and emotional rhythm to create instant trust. And when it's done right, it feels like magic, because the other person's brain doesn't see imitation. It feels connection. Here's the wild part. You don't even need to say much for this to work. The human brain is wired to bond through reflection. When someone subtly mirrors your posture, gestures, or facial expressions, it activates a part of your brain called the mirror neuron system, the same network that fires when you perform those actions yourself. In simple terms, your brain mistakes their behavior as its own. It starts to think, this person is like me. And that thought, that sense of sameness, is the foundation of trust. But here's where most people mess it up. They try too hard. They copy movements directly, like some awkward human echo. That kills the effect instantly. Real mirroring is slow, subconscious, and almost invisible. You don't mimic, you sync. You align your energy, your breathing, your pace of speech. If they lean back, you lean back a few seconds later. If they pause, you pause naturally too. It's not acting, it's attunement. You're tuning yourself to their emotional frequency until they feel, without knowing why, completely at ease around you. Think about how it feels when someone truly listens. They're not just nodding. Their body tilts slightly toward you. Their face softens. Their eyes stay on yours just long enough to show presence but not pressure. That's body language harmony, and it tells your nervous system, I'm safe here. We're social animals built on signals. Long before we had words, we had posture, expression, and rhythm to communicate safety. Mirroring taps directly into that ancient system. One of the clearest examples comes from negotiation studies. Researchers found that when salespeople mirrored their clients' gestures and tone, deal success rates jumped dramatically. Why? Because the mirrored clients felt understood. They didn't consciously notice the mimicry, but they walked away saying, I just like that person. They got me. And once someone feels understood, persuasion becomes effortless. But this trick isn't just about getting what you want. It's about creating genuine connection. When you match someone's energy with authenticity, their guard drops. They stop evaluating and start relating. It's like their nervous system whispers, "This person gets it." That's why therapists, leaders, and even great friends use mirroring naturally. It isn't manipulation. It's empathy expressed physically. Here's something subtle you can try. Next time you're in a conversation, slow your awareness. Notice their breathing pace. Are they animated or calm? Fast talker or slow thinker? Match your rhythm to theirs. If they're speaking softly, lower your tone. If they're relaxed, ease into your gestures. Do it gently enough that even you almost don't notice. After a few minutes, you'll feel a strange sense of harmony. A quiet connection that feels mutual, not forced. That's the subconscious trust forming in real time. But the magic part is this. Once that bond is built, you can lead it. After you've mirrored someone long enough, try changing your body language slightly, like straightening your posture or slowing your breathing. You'll notice they'll often follow without realizing. That's called leading through rapport. It's how great speakers calm crowds, how confident people make tense rooms relax, how empathy transforms influence into leadership. Of course, the key is intention. If you use this trick to manipulate, people's intuition will pick it up fast. Humans can feel when energy is off. But if you use it to connect, to listen deeper, to make someone feel safe in your presence, that's when it becomes powerful. Because trust isn't built through words, it's built through rhythm. That's the body language copy. The quiet skill that makes strangers feel like old friends, that turns tension into trust and connection into influence. Mirror carefully, feel genuinely, and let the mind do what it's wired to do. Bond with those who reflect it. The emotional anchoring trick. You ever catch a song that hits you so hard, it drags you straight back to a memory, a smell, a phrase, a place, and suddenly, you're not just remembering it, you're feeling it again. That's not nostalgia. That's conditioning. The human brain is a linking machine, constantly connecting emotions to symbols, sounds, and sensations. And when you learn to control that process intentionally, you unlock one of the most powerful psychological tools there is. The emotional anchoring trick. It's how you can tie a specific feeling to a word, an object, or even a simple gesture, and trigger it whenever you want. This is how it works. Your brain doesn't store emotions as random chaos. It stores them with context. What you saw, heard, smelled, or touched at the moment you felt something strong. Every time that emotion is repeated in the same context, the connection strengthens. That's why athletes pump themselves up with a song before every game, or why a certain cologne can remind you of a person long gone. The external thing becomes a switch for the internal state. Now imagine using that on purpose. Let's say you want to feel confident on command. You can create a psychological anchor for that feeling. Here's how. First, think of a time when you felt unstoppable. Maybe you crushed a challenge, gave a perfect answer, nailed something that mattered. Get back into that moment. Feel it fully. Then, as that confidence peaks, pick something small and repeatable. Touch your wrist, say a specific word, or visualize a color. Do it a few times while the emotion is strong. The brain links the physical cue to the internal state. Do it enough, and soon that cue alone brings the feeling back. It's the same mechanism behind Pavlov's experiment, the one where dogs salivated at the sound of a bell because they'd learned to associate it with food. Humans are far more complex. but the principle is identical. When emotion and repetition meet, the brain fuses them together. You can use that to control your own emotional patterns or influence others. Here's an example. Say you're a speaker and you want your audience to feel inspired every time you say a certain phrase. You can anchor that emotion by pairing your words with energy. A strong tone, open body language, vivid imagery. Do it consistently, and that phrase becomes an emotional trigger. Later, when you say it again softly or unexpectedly, the audience still feels the same rush. Their brains replay the emotion automatically, even without the full performance. That's anchoring at work. Emotion tied to a symbol. You can do this with objects too. Actors do it all the time. They carry a ring, a necklace, or a coin that holds an emotional charge. Before going on stage, they touch it and let the linked emotion flood back. It's not superstition. It's neurological recall. The object holds no power on its own, but the brain treats it like a key that unlocks a stored state. Now, here's where it gets fascinating. Anchoring works both ways. If you constantly feel anxious while holding your phone, your brain can link that tension to the device itself. Later, just picking it up can trigger the same feeling. That's why emotional awareness matters. You're building anchors every day, whether you realize it or not. The trick isn't to stop it. It's to shape it consciously. You can even use anchoring in relationships. If you consistently share positive emotions with someone, laughter, excitement, warmth, while using a certain phrase or gesture, their brain connects that feeling to you. The next time you show up, the emotion arrives first. It's not manipulation if it's genuine, it's emotional consistency. You're teaching their brain what you represent. The key to making anchors powerful is intensity and repetition. The more emotionally charged the moment, the stronger the link. A single deep experience can anchor faster than a dozen shallow ones. That's why the best time to set an anchor is during peak emotion, right when the feeling is real, raw, and alive. So think about this. What if you could summon calm in chaos, confidence under pressure, or love in loneliness, all through a single cue you created yourself? That's what emotional anchoring gives you. You're not at the mercy of random moods anymore. You're programming your brain's shortcuts. That's the emotional anchoring trick. The hidden language of the mind that ties feelings to symbols and turns emotion into something you can summon, shape, and share at will. The illusion of truth. You've probably heard a phrase so many times that at some point, it just started to sound true. Maybe it was an old saying, a rumor, or even a piece of advice that never made sense but somehow felt right because you'd heard it again and again. That's not logic at work. That's repetition. The mind confuses familiarity with truth, and when something sounds familiar enough, it bypasses skepticism and slides straight into belief. That's the illusion of truth. The brain's sneaky shortcut that makes repetition feel like reality. It started as a survival mechanism. Early humans didn't have time to verify every detail about the world. If they heard the same warning or story repeated by multiple voices, the brain tagged it as important, maybe even life-saving. Repetition became a signal for trust. Fast forward to now, and that same mental shortcut still runs the show. But instead of keeping us safe from predators, it often tricks us into believing things simply because they sound familiar. Psychologists tested this in the late 1970s in what became known as the illusion of truth effect. People were shown random statements like, "The Pacific Ocean is the largest ocean on Earth," and a penny weighs 12 grams. Weeks later, they were shown the same list mixed with new ones. Guess what happened? Even when participants knew a statement was false, they were more likely to call it true the second time, just because they'd seen it before. Familiarity had replaced logic. Now think about what that means in everyday life. The songs on the radio, the slogans in ads, the phrases in politics. They're not designed to persuade you once. They're designed to repeat until your brain mistakes the sound of recognition for the feeling of truth. You don't analyze the words anymore. You absorb the rhythm. That's why a lie told often enough doesn't just sound believable. It feels comfortable. Here's what's wild. This doesn't just happen externally. You do it to yourself. Every time you repeat a thought, your brain strengthens its neural pathway. Tell yourself you're not good enough long enough, and your mind stops questioning it. It starts accepting it as reality. But the same mechanism can work in your favor. Repeat a new belief consistently and emotionally, and your brain begins to internalize that instead. The illusion of truth doesn't care what's real. It only cares what's repeated. There's a reason affirmations, mantras, and visualization techniques actually work when they're done consistently. It's not magic, it's programming. Each repetition plants a new association, and the more familiar it becomes, the less resistance your brain offers. That's how confidence, motivation, and even identity can be rewired. You're not forcing belief. You're building it through exposure. But here's the dangerous flip side. Repetition can blind you. Entire belief systems, social biases, and misinformation campaigns thrive on this effect. Say something loud enough, long enough, and the collective brain starts to accept it as common sense. The illusion doesn't care about truth, it rewards the echo. That's why awareness is so important. Once you recognize the trick, you start questioning why something feels true. You start asking, do I believe this because it makes sense? Or because I've just heard it too many times? You can even watch this happen in conversation. The person who repeats their point calmly, confidently, and consistently tends to win the room. Not because they're right, but because the brain of everyone listening begins to anchor comfort to their voice. It's a social version of the same effect. The more you hear something, the safer it feels, and safety often disguises itself as truth. Here's the secret to using it consciously. If you want people to remember something or believe something positive, anchor it with repetition, not aggression. Use the same phrase, the same tone, the same rhythm. Let familiarity do the heavy lifting. And if you want to protect yourself from being manipulated, learn to spot when repetition is replacing reasoning. The moment you see the pattern, the spell breaks. That's the illusion of truth. The quiet mental trick that turns repetition into belief, comfort into conviction, and words into reality. What you repeat, you remember. What you remember, you begin to believe. And what you believe, that becomes your world. The out-of-body focus trick. You ever notice how easy it is to give someone else great advice? But when it's your problem, everything gets blurry. That's because when you're inside your own head, emotion takes over logic. You're too close to the chaos to see clearly, but there's a way to break that mental trap in seconds. It's called the out-of-body focus trick. It's the practice of stepping outside yourself mentally, seeing the situation as if you were watching a movie of your life. And when you do that, something wild happens. Your emotional storm calms, your decisions sharpen, and your confidence doubles. Here's why it works. The brain processes self-focused thoughts in third-person thoughts in slightly different regions. When you shift from "I'm stressed" to "they're stressed," meaning when you imagine watching yourself, your brain recruits the same neural systems it uses to evaluate other people. That instantly adds emotional distance. Suddenly, your problem stops feeling like the end of the world and starts looking like a puzzle to solve. You've switched from being the actor drowning in emotion to the director observing the scene. Think of it like this: when you're overwhelmed, you're inside the camera. You're zoomed in on every detail, every mistake, every worry. The out-of-body focus trick forces you to pull the lens back. You start to see context, patterns, and possibilities you couldn't see before. And once you step back mentally, you stop reacting and start responding. Psychologists actually call this self-distancing. They've tested it in experiments where people were asked to recall painful memories either from their own eyes or as if they were watching from outside their body. The results were stunning. Those who used the third-person perspective felt less emotional distress and showed clearer reasoning. The brain literally reduces the intensity of negative emotion when you create psychological distance. You don't suppress the feeling, you just remove its grip. You can use this trick in real time. Let's say you're about to give a big presentation and your nerves are through the roof. Instead of saying, "I'm nervous," try imagining you're watching someone else in your position. Same clothes, same stage, same audience. Watch that person breathe, smile, and start speaking. Then ask yourself, what would I tell them right now? Your brain flips from anxious participant to calm coach. That single shift is often enough to steady your breathing and lower your heart rate. Here's another version. When you catch yourself spiraling, overthinking, replaying mistakes, picture your body sitting where you are. See yourself from above. Notice your posture, your face, your energy. Then narrate it in third person, like an observer. They're just having a moment of self-doubt. They'll be fine in 5 minutes. It sounds simple, but that small change rewires the tone of your inner voice. Compassion replaces criticism. You stop being trapped in your thoughts and start seeing them as passing weather. This trick also boosts performance. Athletes use it all the time, visualizing themselves from the stands, watching their movements, studying their form as if analyzing another player. The brain doesn't fully distinguish between imagination and real experience, so this kind of detached rehearsal strengthens focus and confidence. You're programming calm competence into your nervous system before you even move. The real magic is what it does to your sense of identity. When you can see yourself from the outside, you realize you're not the chaos happening in your head. You're the one observing it. That realization, that separation between you and your thoughts, is the core of mental clarity. It's like upgrading from being lost in the waves to suddenly standing above the ocean, watching it move, but no longer being pulled under. Try it right now. Close your eyes and imagine you're standing across the room, looking at yourself. Notice how your shoulders rise and fall as you breathe. See the expression on your face. Now, from that outside perspective, ask, what would I tell that person if I cared deeply about them? The advice that comes is usually the truth you needed all along. That's the out-of-body focus trick. The simple mental shift that lets you escape the fog of emotion, see yourself clearly, and act with calm precision. because sometimes the best way to find yourself is to step outside and watch. The yes ladder. You ever notice how a conversation can go from nope to yes in a few gentle steps, like someone climbed a ladder without even realizing it? That's the yes ladder. It's not trickery. It's a simple rhythm of small agreements that builds momentum until the big ask feels inevitable and fair. Once you learn to lead with tiny yeses, you stop having to shove people toward your goal. They walk there themselves. Here's the thing most people miss. When someone says yes, their brain rewards them. A tiny dopamine ping follows acceptance, and their mind prefers to be consistent. So the first yes creates a tiny psychological contract. Give them small chances to agree, and each one nudges them toward seeing themselves as the kind of person who agrees with you. That's the ladder. It's Pavlov for cooperation, but kinder and more human. Now the surprising part. Studies in social psychology show that people who agree to little requests are much more likely to agree to larger ones later. That consistency bias is powerful because our identity likes stable stories. If earlier you said yes to a small favor or idea, your later yes doesn't feel like obedience. It feels like integrity. You're just being the person who supports this. That flips persuasion on its head. You stop trying to change minds in one push, and instead build a chain of small commitments. So how do you actually do it without sounding manipulative? Start with questions that are obviously true and hard to deny. Not leading or trap questions. Simple, neutral facts that let the other person affirm themselves. For example, instead of diving into your plan with a hard sell, open with something like, "Do you want this to go smoothly? Do you want results that last?" Those are soft yeses. They are aligned with almost everyone's values. Once you collect a few of those, your listener is already in a state of agreement. Their mental posture shifts from defense to alignment. Next, layer in slightly bigger asks that logically follow the first answers. Now that you both agreed smooth and lasting results matter, ask if they would be open to a small change that increases the chance of that outcome. Keep each step small enough that refusal feels costly to their previous yeses. Humans dislike being inconsistent. If they already said they wanted smooth results, saying no to a minor helpful action creates internal friction. Most people resolve that friction by saying yes. That resolution is what you are guiding toward. Crucially, tone matters more than content. Be curious, not pushy. The yes ladder works because people feel like they are choosing, not being cornered. Invite them into co-creation. Use language that frames your ask as a mutual experiment. Would it make sense to try this for a week and see? That invitation preserves autonomy and makes the next yes a voluntary step, not a surrender. Autonomy is the oxygen for real agreement. There is an ethical line to respect. This technique amplifies influence, so you must use it for outcomes that genuinely help the other person. If you stack yeses only to push someone into something against their interest, you are weaponizing psychology. But used responsibly, the yes ladder simplifies decisions, reduces resistance, and creates collaboration that feels natural. People walk into alignment because they built it themselves. One practical trick to practice: start with micro commitments in normal conversations. Ask for a small favor that costs nothing, like a quick opinion. Get that yes. Then request something slightly larger. Notice how much easier agreement becomes once the habit of yes is established. Over time, you will sense the ladder forming beneath a discussion. Step by step, the path opens. Here's the payoff. When you master the yes ladder, you stop shouting objections at the world and start choreographing consent. You create agreements that feel earned, not extracted. You get buy-in because people have already admitted, in small ways, that they share your goal, and that is the cleanest kind of influence, not forcing change, but coaxing choice. The scarcity hack, you've seen it 1,000 times. That little phrase that flips your brain like a switch. Only 2 left. Offer ends tonight. Limited edition. Suddenly, something you didn't even want a minute ago feels urgent, precious, worth chasing. That's not marketing magic. That's human psychology. It's called the scarcity hack, and it works because the mind is wired to equate rarity with value. The less we think we can have something, the more our brain wants it. Scarcity triggers one of our oldest survival instincts. Thousands of years ago, scarcity meant danger. Food running out, daylight fading, resources shrinking. Anything rare was worth fighting for. That primal wiring still runs deep, even when the resource is a pair of sneakers or a digital sale. When something feels like it's slipping away, the brain's threat center, the amygdala, lights up. It tells you act now or lose forever. You don't pause to evaluate, you move. That's why scarcity creates not just desire, but urgency. Marketers use this constantly, and most of the time, we fall for it. Flash sales, countdown timers, sold-out messages. They all exploit the same mechanism. The trick isn't that the product changes, it's that your perception of it does. Scarcity shifts focus from "do I want this?" to "will I miss my chance?" That small shift hijacks rational thought. You start imagining regret, not satisfaction, and the fear of missing out. That gnawing FOMO is a stronger motivator than almost any form of pleasure. But scarcity isn't just a marketing tactic. It's a psychological lever you can use in everyday life, ethically, to amplify the value of what you offer, whether it's an idea, an opportunity, or even your time. The key is framing. When something is always available, people take it for granted. When it's selective or finite, they treat it with care. If you tell someone, "I'm free anytime," they assume your time isn't valuable. But if you say, "I can do 15 minutes before lunch or after 3, you just created controlled scarcity, and suddenly, your time feels worth scheduling around. The same rule applies to ideas. When you share every thought instantly, people tune out. But when you hold back, offer insights selectively, or make people wait for something, anticipation builds. Scarcity turns curiosity into hunger. The best communicators, leaders, and even artists know this. They don't flood attention, they control access. That control becomes mystique. There's science behind this too. Psychologists Stephen Wurtzel, Jack Lee, and Adele Adewole ran an experiment in the 70s using something as simple as cookies. Participants rated cookies from a jar with only 2 left as far more desirable than the same cookies in a full jar. Nothing changed but perception, and yet that perception changed behavior. Scarcity doesn't alter quality, it alters value in the mind. Now, here's the part most people overlook. Scarcity only works when it's believable. If people sense it's fake, the effect reverses, trust drops, and the value collapses. That's why authentic scarcity is the most powerful form. A mentor who limits clients, an artist who releases 1 print a year, a speaker who only takes select events. These aren't tricks. They're boundaries. Real limits create real demand because people can feel integrity behind them. You can even use the scarcity hack on yourself. When you tell your brain time is endless, motivation dies. But when you set a real deadline, not imagined, but firm, focus sharpens. You've just created mental scarcity. You made the resource of time feel limited, and your brain treats every minute like gold. That's why tight deadlines often produce your best work. The scarcity of time forces clarity. The scarcity hack is everywhere, but its real power isn't in manipulation. It's in awareness. The moment you understand how it works, you stop being unconsciously pulled by it and start using it intentionally. You begin protecting your own attention like the rare thing it is. That's the scarcity hack. The simple truth that value doesn't live in things. It lives in availability. What's rare feels sacred. What's always there feels invisible. And when you learn to control that balance, you stop chasing attention and start commanding it. The priming trick: you know that weird moment when someone walks into a room and before they even say a word, you already feel something about them. Trust, respect, or maybe a little discomfort. That's not intuition. That's priming. The priming trick is one of the most subtle and powerful forms of influence because it shapes people's thoughts before they even make a decision. It's like planting an invisible seed in someone's mind that quietly grows into the reaction you want. Here's how it works. The human brain is a prediction machine. It's constantly scanning for context, sights, sounds, words, emotions, to decide how to interpret what happens next. When you give it a certain cue or stimulus before a key moment, you're actually programming the lens through which everything else will be judged. That's priming in action. Imagine this. Researchers once had participants solve word puzzles filled with words like polite, patience, and respect. When those people later interacted with someone who made them wait, they stayed calm and courteous. Another group solved puzzles with words like rude and impatient. Those people interrupted within minutes. The kicker: none of them realized the words had influenced their behavior. Their subconscious simply matched the environment they'd been primed with. Now, picture how that works in daily life. Let's say you're about to make a big ask, a raise, a collaboration, a favor. Before that conversation even begins, you can prime the other person without them noticing. Compliment their attention to detail. Mention how much you appreciate fair decision makers. Leave them subtly thinking about qualities that align with what you're about to request. You're not manipulating them. You're setting a tone that activates the version of them most likely to agree. It's like walking into a meeting and turning the emotional thermostat before anyone else enters. Warm up the space, and everyone feels safe to say yes. That's the art of priming. You're not forcing a reaction. You're creating the mental environment where the reaction you want naturally fits. Priming even affects perception of you. Colors, posture, tone, they all send invisible cues. If you wear blue, which is subconsciously linked to trust and stability, people perceive you as more reliable. If your voice starts calm and measured, others unconsciously mirror that steadiness. Their brains take your cues as context, and that context tells them how to feel. You're writing the emotional script they'll follow without ever asking them to. Here's the fascinating twist. Priming doesn't just work on others. It works on you too. You can prime your own mind for confidence, focus, or calm by feeding it the right signals. Want to feel more assertive before an interview? Stand tall, speak slower, visualize success. Those actions prime your brain to expect confidence, and it delivers. You're literally prepping your nervous system to match the story you feed it. One study even showed that holding a warm cup of coffee made participants rate strangers as more kind and generous compared to those holding iced coffee. Nothing else changed except temperature, but that simple physical cue primed the brain to associate warmth with warmth. That's how delicate and automatic priming is. It doesn't ask for permission, it just happens. The key to using the priming trick ethically is intention. You're not planting false ideas. You're choosing which truths to highlight. If you want someone to see your best side, show it early through tone, energy, or subtle context. If you want people to feel open and receptive, prime them with calmness, not control. Influence isn't about forcing agreement. It's about aligning perception. And here's where it gets deep. Once you understand priming, you start seeing how much of your reality has already been shaped before you notice it. The music playing in a store, the color of a website button, even the scent in a room. They're all cues guiding your feelings and choices. You realize free will is often less about whether you decide and more about what was influencing you before you decided. So the next time you want to guide an outcome, whether in conversation, creativity, or leadership, don't start with persuasion. Start with priming. Create the emotional and psychological atmosphere where the choice you want feels natural. That's the real power of the priming trick. Influence that happens before the first word is even spoken. The cognitive dissonance hack. You ever watch someone argue passionately for something they didn't even believe at first, and by the end, they've convinced themselves it was their idea all along? That's not luck. That's cognitive dissonance. And when you understand how to trigger it, you can make people defend your ideas as if they were their own. It sounds manipulative, but it's really about how the mind fights to stay consistent with itself. The brain hates internal conflict, so once you know how to create that tension, you can guide it toward resolution, and that resolution often lands right where you want it. Here's the truth about human nature: we care less about being right and more about feeling right. When our actions, beliefs, or words don't align, our brain enters what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, an uncomfortable mental tug of war. We feel that something's off, and we'll do almost anything to fix it. Most of the time, we fix it not by changing our behavior, but by rewriting our beliefs to justify what we already did. That's the secret doorway to influence. Let me give you a real example. Back in the 1950s, researchers Leon Festinger and Merrill Carlsmith ran a study where participants did a mind-numbing task, turning pegs on a board for an hour. Then they were asked to tell the next participant it was fun. Some were paid $20 to lie. Others were paid just $1. Here's the twist. The people who got only $1 ended up actually believing the task was fun. Why? Because the tiny reward wasn't enough to justify the lie, so their brain had to create a new belief. Maybe it really was enjoyable, just to feel consistent. Their minds rewrote reality to erase the tension. That's the essence of the cognitive dissonance hack. You don't convince people by forcing agreement. You make them act in alignment with your idea, even in a small way. Once they do, their brain works to justify that action. If you can get someone to take a little step, sign a petition, share your post, try a sample, they'll later tell themselves they did it because they believed in it. That's not persuasion by logic, that's persuasion by identity. Here's how you can use it naturally. Let's say you're pitching a new idea to your team. Instead of asking them to commit right away, ask for a tiny input first. Maybe their opinion on a part of the plan, or a suggestion for improvement. That simple act of contribution connects them emotionally to the concept. Once they've invested effort or thought, they've created a link between themselves and your idea. Their brain now feels an urge to defend it because opposing it would mean contradicting their own behavior. You can also use this in relationships, sales, or leadership. The goal isn't to trap anyone. It's to help people align with something they might already subconsciously want, but haven't admitted yet. If you want someone to adopt a healthy habit, don't argue about it. Get them to do one small behavior, like trying a single workout or prepping one meal. Once they act, their identity starts to shift. The brain whispers, "I'm the kind of person who does this." And just like that, the behavior reinforces itself. Cognitive dissonance also explains why arguing rarely changes minds. When you attack someone's belief head on, you make them defensive. The tension you create gets resolved not by them agreeing with you, but by doubling down on their old belief. That's why great persuaders don't argue. They guide people to take actions that make them feel consistent with the new idea. The change comes from the inside, not the outside. You can even use this trick on yourself. If you struggle to stay disciplined or confident, act like you already are. Say yes to small behaviors that match the identity you want. Your brain will work backward to justify those actions. I must be disciplined because I'm doing disciplined things. Over time, belief catches up to behavior. The real art of the cognitive dissonance hack isn't manipulation. It's alignment. It's understanding that humans don't like gaps between who they say they are and what they do. So instead of trying to change their words, you nudge their actions. You create micro moments of choice that force the brain to reconcile the difference. And once it starts rewriting the story, that story becomes the new truth. That's how you make people defend your ideas without ever arguing for them. You don't push. You just let their own mind do the heavy lifting. Because once someone decides they believe something, even a little bit, they'll fight to protect that belief like it's always been theirs. The chunking trick: you ever try to remember a long string of numbers or random facts and your brain just taps out halfway through? That's because you're working memory, the short-term part of your brain that handles new information has a hard limit. For most people, it can only hold around 7 bits of information at once. But here's the wild part: that limit doesn't apply to chunks. The chunking trick is the way to hack that limit, to double or even triple your memory power by grouping information so your brain treats it as one piece instead of many. Here's a simple example. Try memorizing this 721946382. Kind of painful, right? Now try this 721946382. Same digits, but your brain grabs it in one go. You just turn 9 separate items into 3 manageable chunks. That's chunking, compressing raw data into patterns your brain already understands. Once you know how to do that deliberately, your memory stops feeling like an overloaded inbox and starts feeling like a clean, organized system. Your brain loves patterns. It's built to recognize them because patterns mean predictability, and predictability means survival. Early humans didn't remember every single movement of an animal. They remembered the pattern that meant time to hunt or time to hide. That same instinct now runs your learning process. When you group pieces of information into meaningful categories, you're teaching your brain to treat them as single units. Instead of 9 digits, you get one phone number. Instead of 50 random facts, You get one clear story. Take language learning. If you try to memorize 100 words individually, you'll struggle. But if you group them, like all words related to food, or travel, or emotion, suddenly it sticks. That's chunking. You're not just memorizing sounds, you're building meaning bridges. The same trick applies to studying, remembering speeches, or even learning a new skill. Here's the science behind it. Your working memory and long-term memory operate like two layers of storage. Working memory holds information temporarily, a kind of mental clipboard. Long-term memory is where things actually stick. Chunking creates shortcuts between those two systems. When you link bits of data together into a pattern, your brain encodes it as one stronger unit, which transfers faster and lasts longer. That's why musicians remember entire songs as one flow instead of every single note. They've chunked the music into meaningful sequences. And the cool part is, chunking doesn't have to be logical. It just has to make sense to you. The brain doesn't care whether your connections are scientific or silly, as long as they're vivid. If you're trying to remember a grocery list, don't just repeat items. Imagine a weird story that ties them together. Picture a banana driving a milk truck into a mountain of cereal. Your brain loves absurd visuals because they chunk multiple items into one memorable scene. It's not childish, it's efficient. You can also chunk time. Ever wonder why some people seem insanely productive? They don't just manage hours, they chunk them. Instead of scattering attention across 20 tiny tasks, they group similar work together. That reduces context switching, which eats up mental energy. When your brain stays in one chunk of focus, writing, planning, creating, you conserve bandwidth and retain information faster. Chunking isn't just a memory hack, it's an energy hack. Here's how to start using it consciously. Step 1. When you face something complex, pause and look for patterns. What pieces naturally belong together? Step 2 is give each group a name, image, or theme, something your brain can tag. Step 3, connect the chunks in a logical or emotional sequence. Once that structure's in place, your brain can store and retrieve it effortlessly. Think of memory like a bookshelf. Without chunking, you're tossing random pages everywhere. With chunking, you're stacking books by category. It's not that your brain suddenly got bigger, it just got organized. You're giving it hooks to hang information on instead of leaving it in a pile. And here's the secret payoff: chunking doesn't just make you remember more. It makes you understand more. When your brain sees the bigger picture, it starts finding connections you didn't notice before. Information turns into insight. Learning becomes fluid. That's the chunking trick. The shortcut to doubling your memory power. Stop memorizing one brick at a time and start stacking walls. Because once your brain learns how to group, patterns become stories, stories become knowledge, and knowledge becomes something you can recall anytime, without effort. The memory palace. You walk into a house that exists only in your mind. The floorboards creak the same way they always do. You smell the wood, feel the air, hear the echo of your steps. But this time, the house isn't just a house. Every room, every object, every corner holds a piece of information. A number, a name, a fact, a concept. You don't scroll through it. You walk through it. That's the memory palace, the ancient technique that turns memory into architecture, and your mind into a map you can explore forever. It sounds like magic, but it's pure neuroscience. Your brain isn't great at remembering abstract data, but it's phenomenal at remembering places. Evolution made sure of it. Early humans could recall landscapes in vivid detail, where the food was, where danger hid, where shelter waited. The memory palace takes that ancient spatial wiring and repurposes it for modern memory. It turns raw information into a journey your brain was built to remember. Here's how it works. Step 1. Pick a place you know so well you could navigate it blindfolded. Your childhood home, your favorite cafe, your daily route to work. That's your palace. Step 2. Decide what you want to remember. Maybe a speech, a list, or complex data. Step 3. Assign each piece of information to a specific spot along a path through that location. You don't just store it, you imagine it vividly. The weirder, louder, or more emotional the image, the better it sticks. Let's say you're trying to memorize the planets in order. You open your front door and picture the sun blasting light through your hallway. On the couch, Mercury is melting like metal in the heat. Venus lounges beside it, glowing gold. Mars is in your kitchen, stirring a red soup. Jupiter's enormous storm spins in your bathroom mirror. Each planet gets a location, and each location anchors the memory. When you mentally walk through your house later, the sequence unfolds naturally. One planet per room, one memory per step. The reason this works is because spatial memory uses a completely different neural network from verbal memory. It's handled by the hippocampus, the part of your brain shaped like a seahorse, responsible for navigation. When you connect information to physical space, you're giving your brain a structure to hang data on. That structure is sticky. It keeps details alive long after you'd normally forget them. Professional memory athletes use this exact method to memorize thousands of random digits or entire decks of cards in minutes. They don't have photographic memory. They have practiced navigation. They build mental palaces filled with bizarre, emotional, unforgettable imagery. Like a clown juggling sevens in the kitchen or a tiger made of diamonds guarding the bathroom door. Their secret isn't power. It's creativity. But you don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to use this. The trick is to make your palace personal. Use places that mean something to you. The smell of your old room, the sound of your car door closing, the curve of your hallway. Emotion is the glue that makes memory last. So when you visualize, exaggerate everything. Make it dramatic, make it absurd. The brain loves extremes. The more you feel the image, the deeper it embeds. You can even layer palaces. Once one fills up, build another, or connect them like a network. Your school links to your apartment links to your favorite park. Each location holds a different category of information. You can store languages, history facts, phone numbers, even daily to-do lists this way. You're not memorizing, you're exploring. Here's the best part: when you walk through your palace in your mind, it feels effortless. Your brain retrieves the information naturally because it follows the same path you built. You'll start to remember things not as random facts, but as landmarks. It stops being data. It becomes geography. The memory palace is proof that your mind is limitless when you give it structure. You can store entire worlds of knowledge simply by giving them a home, and the next time you need to recall something, a number, a quote, an idea, you won't struggle to remember. You'll just walk down a familiar hallway, open the right door, and it'll be waiting right there, exactly where you left it.